The girl called Rito and said that she had changed her mind about their plans after the show, and that they were now going on a big horse ride. Hearing this, the employee replied that everything was already prepared and waiting for them. The princess was extremely surprised by this turn of events, but Katerina was not feeling well that day, which forced everyone to reconsider their plans. The butler hastened to reassure her, stating that, of course, she was already completing all the preparations. All the servants were shouting in confusion that they needed to prepare food and drinks for the orchestra, call the travel partner, even though he was from the aristocracy, find out how many aristocrats were invited, and get an answer. The princess said thoughtfully and quietly that she suddenly wanted something completely different, something different from the usual entertainment and festive events. She ordered the servant to replace Katerina with Biro and obtain permission from the aristocrats to go fishing. She emphasized the need for a decent performance by the orchestra and no savings. Upon returning, she expects delicious tea and treats. Rito confirmed the completion of the tasks. The girl was deep in thought, trying to come up with another task for the worker. She announced that he was now finally free. The young man, with a sense of duty and devotion to his mistress, was glad to have the opportunity to serve her since he was her butler. Rito quickly opened the door and literally ran out of the room, frightening the other servants with his abrupt movement. They froze in bewilderment, watching the quickly retreating figure of the young butler. The atmosphere in the room instantly changed, and a tense silence hung in the air. Entering the next room, the boy slammed the massive wooden door shut, blocking out the outside noise. Finding himself isolated, he sighed in relief, leaning his back against the wall. Allowing himself to loosen his control, the young man closed his eyes, regaining his breathing and balance. A young man standing in a room of the royal castle suddenly shouted with all his might that he could no longer bear it. The tension had reached its limit, and it was impossible to live like this any longer. The thunderous sound cut through the space, spreading far beyond the rooms and passages. He was tired of the fact that the mistress's demands changed unpredictably depending on her mood. The number of tasks became more and more mockingly greater, and the punishments for failure to complete them more severe. Reduction in salary and vacation. Deep inside, there was one single conclusion growing in his head. He needed to act urgently, to flee. Otherwise, the consequences would be irreversible. The thought of escape became an obsession, the only way out of the vicious circle of suffering and humiliation. Although many years had passed since he was unexpectedly taken from the orphanage straight to the palace, the young man often mentally returned to those memorable events. At first, the service in the palace seemed pleasant and understandable. Daily classes were fun and relaxed, allowing one to get used to the new space without any particular difficulties. Around that time, the transformation of an ordinary worker into a personal butler of a famous person gradually began. Habits, interests, priorities changed. New responsibilities appeared, and relationships with the hostess became more complicated. Gradually, the duties became more complicated, the workload increased, and the level of responsibility increased. The young man found himself in a situation where every mistake could cost him dearly, causing discontent with the capricious mistress. This led to constant stress. In essence, it was necessary to look after her things, cook, wash clothes, clean personal premises, give advice on domestic policy and political intrigue. The rest had to be kept silent, since they forced her to commit dirty deeds. The guy breathed a sigh of relief, realizing that he had managed to overcome all the trials that had befallen him. These years of service were a real test of his will and endurance. He recalled moments when fatigue and disappointment almost broke his spirit, but his inner strength helped him overcome the difficulties. Rito could barely move his legs, feeling physically and mentally tired. Every muscle ached from the tension. His head was spinning from lack of rest. The difficulties of the service sometimes seemed unbearable, forcing him to doubt the correctness of his choice of profession. For him, such conditions became a real test of strength. Daily workload, lack of rest, and constant pressure led to complete physical and emotional exhaustion. If this continued, the guy understood that he would not last long. The only way to salvation was to escape. But the young man realized that it would not be easy to free himself from the influence of the capricious princess. The binding social obligations held him tightly, blocking the path to freedom. In other words, the young man had to hide where the hand of the powerful mistress would not reach. The only way to gain freedom was to escape abroad. away from the influence and power of the local nobility. Thinking about his future, the young man realized that it was too late to retreat. The decision was final. Studying the map and collecting information, he found the perfect shelter. It was the kingdom of Asurita, a forest neighboring country, a potential enemy of the mighty Gerudo Empire. The boy believed that it was worth telling more about it, that in this country, it was not your race or social status that mattered, but your abilities and talents. Since Azurita was in a state of hostility with the empire where Rito came from, the young man knew almost nothing about its internal structure, despite visiting the country. The boy was well aware that the princess would hardly get him here. He devoted all his time to fulfilling the many difficult orders of the mistress, which often seemed impossible. After all, if earlier he managed to overcome the obstacles that arose daily, now the guy will be able to adapt to the new reality, preserving his dignity and faith in himself. The only option left was to use the knowledge and experience accumulated over the years of service in the palace as a butler. The young man decided to use the acquired skills effectively in order to finally get rid of the hated job. Rito left the room. He realized that the opportune moment had come to carry out his plan. The princess had left with the nobles and her racing companion. This meant that the castle was temporarily unattended, giving him the opportunity to leave the walls of the hated home. The lady strictly forbade any personnel to leave the castle grounds without permission or enter without special need. To avoid trouble, he believed that it was necessary to avoid contact with people and to be extremely careful. Stepping beyond the fortress walls, the young man froze, listening to his sensations. A mixture of relief and anxiety, like a soft sea surf, rolled in waves, touching the deep layers of consciousness. Rito left the castle. He was surprised to find that the guards did not hinder his departure. As he freely crossed the gate, he felt relieved, but also anxious. This allowed him to achieve the desired result. But the inadequacy of the palace's security system was alarming. The maid was surprised by the question asked by the butler about the state of security in the royal palace and suggested that perhaps Beck, the head of the guard, got it because he smoked in the wrong place. The young man concluded that the head of the guard skipped duty and preferred to rest. Another servant, when asked about the guard responsible for identifying dark mage invaders, replied that a week ago, the new guard who replaced the previous one rebelled due to the lack of instructions. Rito concluded that if he raised the alarm now, there would be no reaction. Then he approached another guard, asking if he was responsible for guarding the garden at this time of day. He received the answer that the person responsible for guarding the garden at this time was Beck, but no one knew where he was. The butler thought that this Beck definitely needed to be fired. The young man could not even imagine that the guards had degraded to such an extent in a short period of time. Moreover, if the enemies decided to attack now, the castle would have to be defended by its own forces, since the officially appointed guards would simply not be there. The young man is deep in thought, imagining possible scenarios for how events will develop after his departure. Not understanding what will happen to the castle's security if he leaves his position, the boy's thoughts turned to the next important question. What would happen if the entire castle was in mortal danger, and he himself was not nearby? Then he remembered the words of the princess, who claimed that even Minata, who was responsible for security, did not care about defense, and asked not to blame others, but to continue working. She herself did not understand the issues of defense, believing that if the existing defense seemed insufficient, he would correct the situation. The young man shuddered as he realized the meaning of what was said. The lady's frivolous attitude towards security issues shocked him. It seemed incredible that the supreme ruler did not attach importance to the defense of the castle. However, after a moment, the butler smiled broadly, feeling calm and accepting of the inevitable. Deciding that what was happening was beyond his competence, he came to the conclusion that it was better to let events unfold naturally. When setting out on a journey across the vast empire, Rito had no information about the political situation, cultural characteristics of the regions, or the level of safety in the cities. The risks of the journey were frightening, but the desire to explore new things overcame his fears. From that moment on, he discovers a new world, full of secrets and wonders. Most of all, he was worried about what was waiting ahead, what adventures tomorrow would bring. The adventurer was free. The warrior also stood out noticeably and looked very interesting. The future beckoned, promising a lot of unforgettable moments and new acquaintances. Along with pleasant excitement came the realization of the significance of the step taken, changing life forever. The young man boldly moved forward towards the unknown. After walking hundreds of miles, the traveler finally entered the wide, stone-paved streets of the great city of the empire, Dogorder Garistoro. He heard the gatekeeper telling the boy that even if he had a letter of recommendation, he still needed to quickly obtain a certificate to enter the vocational school. And if he had such a letter, he asked to be told about it. The young man introduced himself as Owen Rich, profession, adventurer, and asked in bewilderment whether he was really so hard to see. Rito thought that his frankness was quite natural, considering the massive existing problems, and remembered the conversation he had heard earlier about the letter required for admission to a vocational school. Garistera has numerous vocational schools offering training in various fields. Graduates from these schools are highly respected and hold prestigious positions. The young man cautiously approached the respected gentleman with a request to create and sign a letter of recommendation. Wanting to enter a professional school, the young man needed a letter that could ensure career growth and financial stability. Owen looked at him thoughtfully and asked who this mysterious newcomer was who had come here asking for a recommendation. Rito knew that using his real name was dangerous and introduced himself as Rito, a traveler exploring the continent to learn how to fight. Owen looked at his new acquaintance with interest, noting the peculiarities of his appearance and equipment. The way the young man was dressed seemed rather unusual to him for a real traveler. The gatekeeper explained that it was normal for applicants to have no letters. Schools educate people for the empire. Letters of recommendation or diplomas serve as a pass for those wishing to enroll, even if they do not have citizenship, and they are given only to those who are worth paying attention to. He asked the new recruits if they wanted to become adventurers or warriors. To get a recommendation, they had to be either a soldier or have special skills. Otherwise, without the appropriate abilities, the recommendation would be difficult to obtain. Lost in his memories, Werto mentally returned to his years of service in the palace, going over the events, meetings, and trials. Memories of caring for the princess, participating in important events, and mastering the art of communicating with high-ranking officials filled his heart with pride and warmth. In the kingdom, he won a tournament for those who have no special talents. Otherwise, the princess would hate him even more. In addition, it was said that a person's origin is hidden here so that he cannot be used here. The young man was at a loss as to what decision to make. Owen insistently asked him to briefly express the gatekeeper's doubts about their fighting qualities. Showing his carelessness with weapons, the boy theatrically swung his huge sword, almost hitting the guy standing next to him. The playful demonstration created an ominous atmosphere, making the gatekeeper feel hostile. Thus, Werto could demonstrate his strength. Owen declared that if he defeated him in a duel, he would receive a recommendation, and asked the guard's opinion. For some time, the hesitant gatekeeper carefully indicated his position, expressing caution and prudence, but the impatient youth resolutely insisted on holding a duel, assuring everyone of his readiness to win and receive a well-deserved reward. During the preparation for the fight, Werto asked his opponent to recite a prayer to ensure a vacant room in the hospital. The humorous remark, delivered with a gentle smile, caught his interlocutor off guard, making him appear fearless. The guy continued, adding that no one knows who will win, and reminded the old adage that, if you don't try, you'll never know. After a short pause, he confidently accepted the challenge, showing his willingness to enter the fray and prove his worth. The gatekeeper declared the fight open and explained that, according to the laws of the empire, a public figure must be a witness to ensure the fairness of the duel. Since this was a mock fight, an ordinary guard of the walls and gates would take over the supervision. Having announced the rules, he declared that the duel was about to begin. Owen looked seriously at his opponent and asked him not to disappoint him, expressing confidence that the fight would go quickly. Werto said that he would try to live up to expectations and not disappoint. The admission that the opponent was incredibly strong-willed and embodied the image of a true adventurer gave a little uncertainty. The opponent was a strong and skilled opponent with many years of combat experience. The young man had to mobilize all his strength to confront this master. The fight would require maximum concentration, precise calculation, and virtuoso use of weapons. Owen loudly announced that the fight was about to begin. Immediately after the start of the duel was announced, he suddenly rushed forward, making a powerful chopping blow from top to bottom. The blade cut through the air with a cutting sound, aiming straight at the opponent's shoulder. The gatekeeper watched the dynamic fight closely, periodically jumping up in surprise. The power and speed of the fighter's strikes exceeded his expectations, demonstrating a high level of physical training and strategic thinking. Owen noticed that the blow missed its target, causing no significant harm to the opponent. Ruto reacted to the attack instantly, seeing the blade approaching from under his half-closed eyelids. With one powerful leap to the left, he avoided the trajectory of the blow, allowing the weapon to glide past his shoulder. Owen noted that the young man was doing a good job of dodging the blows. The young man himself understood that the shockwave had torn his clothes, but the enemy was not using magic to strengthen his attacks. In other words, he relies solely on brute physical force, without resorting to magic or clever tactics. The enemy has decided that he has had enough of giving in. Owen went on the offensive, methodically delivering a series of fast, powerful punches, moving smoothly and confidently, each movement following a technique honed over the years that allowed him to maintain energy and precision over a long period of time. Berto knew that his opponent had great strength and experience, but despite this, none of his blows hit their target. Each attack flew past, only lightly touching his clothes. Owen glanced at his younger opponent with irritation, feeling his irritation growing. How many times had he delivered powerful blows designed to hit the target, but each time the latter managed to dodge the attack? He shouted that although Ruto was good at dodging, it did not prove his strength. Owen was convinced that the young man was afraid, and urged him to demonstrate true strength and skill. Ruto advised to watch his actions, demonstrating complete control of the situation. He masterfully dodged the blows. His body was filled with magical energy, gently pulsating and shimmering with a white glow. Filled with energy, the young man suddenly went on the offensive, unleashing a rapid series of attacking combinations. Owen was amazed by such power. Ruto's blows became faster and more precise, covering the enemy's body with a network of small wounds and scratches. He accurately knocked the sword from the weakened fingers of his opponent. At this time, the gatekeeper loudly announced the end of the duel, asking both fighters to remain motionless. The tension reached its peak when the young man delivered the finishing blow, putting all his strength and fury into it. There was a loud metallic ringing sound, accompanied by a flash of light marking the end of the duel. The gatekeeper angrily demanded that further use of the weapon be stopped and that it be stopped immediately. Having won the battle, Ruto relaxed slightly, catching his breath and straightening out the folds of his clothes. He paid special attention to his tie, tightening the knot more neatly and symmetrically. The young man asked to be forgiven for ruining the princess's appearance, and then realized that he had almost let it slip, considering it a bad habit. Owen gave in, realizing that he shouldn't have tried to force his way through. Already apologizing for his lack of restraint, he asked to be allowed to stand up. Ruto apologized, realizing that his behavior might have seemed impudent and inappropriate. Owen said that he used to be a famous bounty hunter and called himself the Black Swordsman, but he realized that he was no match for this guy. The young man asked where people like him had been hiding all this time. Ruto knew that he couldn't say that he had escaped from the enemy country's palace. The gatekeeper asked Owen if he had spoken of the Black Swordsman. and he assumed that in front of him was that same black swordsman, Owen. The young man confirmed that this was true and was surprised that he had not said this and why he had not seen it. The gatekeeper exclaimed that the black swordsman was a legend, even among adventurers, that he had single-handedly dealt with 20 thieves using a simple wooden stick. Owen thought the story was greatly embellished, and Ritter knew it was untrue. The guard continued that he was extremely strong and everyone knew about him. In addition to the results of the duel, Mr. Owen will also be issued an invitation. Owen thought it was good, but then their duel made no sense. Rocho emphasized that he immediately felt the extraordinary strength of his opponent and expressed confidence that he was certainly worthy of a letter of recommendation. The gatekeeper, having assessed what he saw, came to a decision regarding the fate of both young people, and he announced that Owen Rish and Rito Reru both receive an invitation to a vocational school. Rito was happy that he could now become a citizen of the Empire, although he was worried, because everything happened unexpectedly. Then he wondered what the princess was doing now and whether she had noticed his absence. He assumed that she was probably in a bad mood and was blaming all the servants. But then the young man thought for a moment, pondering every word he said. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Rito made an important decision that he no longer cared what the mistress would say and what consequences this would have for the palace servants. Until now, he had to work for others, fulfilling their wishes and submitting to someone else's will. But now he realized that from now on, he would work only for himself. The princess angrily threw her cup of tea, shouting her displeasure angrily at the servants. She was genuinely amazed at how blind they could be at times. The lady exclaimed that she had just begun to enjoy the taste of the wonderful tea. But this pleasant moment was suddenly spoiled by the actions of the servants, which made her wonder why no one around her was at all able to appreciate the importance of respecting such moments of her rest. The servant tried to object, thinking that the tea was ordinary, but the princess cried out that this was precisely why she had been repeating the same rule to them over and over again. Always put in an equal amount of sugar. She wondered if she would have to explain such elementary truths over and over again. The workers instantly exchanged meaningful glances, whispering quickly and quietly among themselves, and they decided to say carefully, trying to express respect and politeness, that this was their first time making tea, and so they could make a mistake. They hastened to add, expressively emphasizing every nuance of their explanation, that previously, Mr. Ito had always been in charge of preparing the tea, and now, finding themselves responsible for such an important matter on their own, they encountered difficulties and made mistakes. Hearing the name of her former subordinate mentioned, the lady felt a sharp surge of anger. She literally seethed inside, restraining herself only by an effort of will, so as not to break down completely. However, despite the anger that had overwhelmed her, the princess still pulled herself together and firmly spoke, addressing the workers, to immediately clean up here and prepare new tea. The servants quickly agreed to carry out the order. Having quickly left the room, they began to busily prepare for a new attempt to please the wayward mistress, hoping for the best outcome of this difficult test, leaving the lady alone with her thoughts. Her thoughts were filled with disdain and outright disappointment. She considered them absolutely worthless, incapable of handling even the simplest task. Since Reito left, and the remaining workers, in her opinion, were completely helpless. The work process turned into a real disaster. Almost none of her orders were carried out properly. Every morning began with new disappointments. Every evening ended with a feeling of deep fatigue and dissatisfaction. The princess took a deep, heavy breath, feeling the weight of the accumulated tension. After much thought and observation, she was forced to admit the bitter truth that things were indeed much worse without Rito. Since the butler had disappeared without a trace, none of the remaining servants had been able to take his place with dignity. The princess believed that if the fugitive returned, he would be punished. The thought of the former employee's whereabouts and plans did not leave her mind. Ruto was not at all happy about the upcoming exam preparation. Owen had to add that the students were not initially informed of this situation. Ruto did not immediately understand what his interlocutor was talking about, and remembered his previous words about the difficulty of entering school and the need for careful preparation for the exam. A friend confirmed that the information was true. The second one added that there was only a week left before the entrance exam and was in shock, since there was very little time left for full preparation. Owen was of the opinion that the information was entirely true, since that was the version that the grandmother from the guild had presented. Ruto agreed, because even though they had letters of recommendation, if they failed the entrance exam, all their efforts would be in vain. Owen loudly objected that this was not the problem, and he continued that he seemed to say that letters of recommendation are for people from other countries, so for them, it is an admission. Also, to get in, you usually have to pass an exam. Entrance examinations are held approximately once every 6 months. The guy continued that to enroll in classes for warriors, you need to pass 2 exams, a written one to test your knowledge, and a test of battle to test your strength. The comrade had proven his strength, but the problem arose with the written exam. Ruto confirmed that he had a poor understanding of internal affairs and was surprised to learn that this would also be tested in the exam. Owen added, emphasizing that it is the testing of theoretical knowledge that is the main part of the selection, because the school prepares useful specialists for the empire. Ruto was visibly deep in thought, concentrating on the information he had received. His face took on a thoughtful expression, his eyes dimmed, and his shoulders slumped slightly. Owen thought that the decision to take the exam had come at the wrong time and suggested skipping it this time to prepare and try to pass it in 6 months. His friend categorically refused, claiming that it was necessary to take part in the exam immediately and begin active preparation. The comrade asked again in surprise, and the guy reaffirmed his intentions. Ruto stated decisively that they would pass the exam in exactly 1 week, and if they devoted every minute of the remaining time to this matter, everything would go smoothly. The friend supported the idea, agreeing with the need for urgent preparation. Owen first thought his friend was joking. The idea of passing the exam in such a short time seemed so incredible, and then he heard an apology from him. He was even more curious about why Ruto was in such a hurry. The young man answered evasively that he had personal motives that pushed him to speed up the exam. He understood that he himself was not sure what would happen in Osterite in 6 months, and therefore wanted to quickly settle in and gain a foothold where he was now. Ruto accepted his conditions, agreeing to prepare for the exam in a short time, but wondered why his comrade needed to take the exam so urgently. After all, he had already become famous as an adventurer, and the guy believed that physical strength alone was enough for a successful career. Therefore, the question of why he absolutely had to enroll in warrior classes at a professional school remained unclear. Owen explained that getting a profession gives stability because the life of an adventurer is associated with constant risks, lack of stable employment, and bad food. That is why it is better to try to enroll as soon as possible to avoid such a situation. Werto was sincerely glad that his friend took care of all the necessary purchases for him and explained in detail all the points that he did not know. Although the young man saw that his friend sometimes acted impulsively, thinking first and then drawing conclusions and correcting himself, he admitted that overall he was a great guy. Owen noticed that his friend's face now expressed a strange mixture of emotions, which was alarming and puzzling, but he immediately added that in any case, there were only 2 days left until the exam. Rito confirmed that yes, time was up, and they had done everything possible. There was no point in preparing anymore, and the preparation could be considered complete. 2 days later, at the vocational school, on the day of the exam, the attendant announced that there was an exam taking place, and that to enter, one had to go through the main gate. Berto was deeply distressed by the realization that all his efforts had been in vain. He was upset, admitting that he had managed to read less than 70% of the proposed text. Owen was shocked by his comrade's words, barely holding back his emotions. After all, he had studied these 70 books for a whole week in the library, and before that, the adventurer would hardly have believed in such a miracle of memory. But he saw with his own eyes how his friend turned the pages amazingly quickly and remembered the material almost verbatim. Rurto continued, explaining that he wanted to study and memorize all the books beforehand. But now he realized that it was pointless. If he had been given 3 more days, perhaps he would have been able to complete what he had started. Owen asked his friend not to be discouraged because he did everything he could. Before Rurto's eyes, all participants differed from each other in age. They represented different races and social strata of society. Owen explained that such diversity is an important part of the imperial tradition. The empire proclaims the equality of all its inhabitants, regardless of origin, status, or nationality. The only criteria for evaluation are the individual qualities and skills of the candidate. This is why people of all ages and social statuses flock here, including half-dragons, as well as the poor. Suddenly, a carriage appeared, attracting the attention of all those present. The participants began to look around, trying to examine the contents of the carriage and understand the significance of its appearance. The royal family came out of the carriage, which caused Werdo's astonishment. He expected to see something interesting, but the appearance of representatives of the highest authority exceeded all expectations. It was Her Highness, the second princess of Melilla, whose appearance stood out for its special beauty and nobility. The girl's hair shone with purity and elegance, perfectly styled in a hairstyle that emphasized her natural attractiveness and sophistication. Rito came to the conclusion that, being the representative of the royal family, the girl looks rather reserved in appearance, but probably feels superior to everyone around her. This meeting reminded him of Kirika, a girl who had the title of princess. Although she was a representative of nobility, her actions and character caused negative associations. Werdo thought that if Kirikou had behaved more kindly and respectfully, her service would have been much easier. And then he didn't understand what they were talking about, because it wasn't connected in any way. Meanwhile, the people were shouting excitedly that important guests had arrived. Owen explained to his friend why he thought there was so much noise there, since the event was attended by very influential people, including the princess herself. The crowd was greeted by an important guest, Beitor from the Murto family. his companions persistently asked to clear the way, announcing that Mr. Beitor was moving here. Ruto realized that these were the children of local aristocrats, and he didn't particularly want to deal with them. Bader's entourage insistently asked that the road be cleared, declaring that the master was on his way to greet Her Majesty. Suddenly, the little girl tripped and began to fall right on top of the aristocrat. She fell and apologized to him. The subordinates reported in panic that Bader-san's clothes were dirty. For them, such an incident was considered an unacceptable violation of etiquette and rules of decency. Ruto became interested in what had happened and why there was so much fuss around. The problem started unexpectedly, and he found the situation suspicious. Bader addressed the girl directly. He demanded that she be punished for the damage caused. Owen was in complete shock when he saw him pull out his wand. Bader continued shouting, convinced that the girl had no idea how much such a set of clothes cost. He emphasized that the jacket alone was valued so highly that ordinary people could only dream of having such money. Thus, she dared to stay in expensive clothes, and the master insisted that she understand that such offenses should not go unpunished. The subordinates fully supported the owner's position, confirming the validity of his demands. Despite the excited state caused by Bader's speech, Ruto internally doubted the high cost of the suit. Seeing the aristocrat's rage, he would not be surprised if he decided to resort to using magic. The girl humbly asked for forgiveness and tried to explain her point of view. She was genuinely surprised by the inflated estimates of the cost of the clothes, as she did not think that they were so expensive, and wondered why the gentleman exaggerated so much. Bader shouted in anger that the girl must immediately pay with her life for her rudeness. The young people reacted instantly to the threat, rushing to her defense. Ruto knew that his opponent did not have any outstanding strength, but events were unfolding too quickly, and his friends barely had time to react. The girl unexpectedly revealed her hidden abilities, astonishing everyone gathered. A strong protective barrier formed, and bright, glowing threads of magic began to emanate from her body. Ruto was shocked as he watched the figures rapidly move away in opposite directions. He did not understand the nature of the magic used, but the most frightening thing was that people were now in the middle of a collision of powerful energy flows. The participants found it impossible to observe such powerful flows of magic up close. They understood that such a manifestation of energy was dangerous and could lead to tragic consequences. Hearing the message about a possible threat to the princess, the guy immediately rushed to the scene. He instantly rushed forward, trying to protect her from a possible attack. In the end, Ruto stopped the attack right in front of Her Majesty, causing everyone to be shocked and amazed. People's eyes widened in surprise, and many gasped as they realized the magnitude of the feat accomplished. After saving Melilla, he hastened to improve his appearance. The guy apologized for the inconvenience and inquired about her health, making sure that the lady was feeling well. The princess's answer confirmed complete well-being. The other participants did not understand what had just happened and where the mysterious protector had come from. They were told that Her Majesty had been magically attacked and that the hero had come from afar and had managed to repel the blow. They considered what had happened an impossible miracle. Owen stood there in complete bewilderment, trying to comprehend what he saw and did not understand who his friend even was. Bader snorted demonstratively, clearly annoyed by the turn of events. While Ruto was catching his breath, he didn't realize what he was doing at all. His body automatically responded to the word princess, a habit he had carried over from his time as Kikira's butler. The young man intended to get rid of the habit when leaving the kingdom. He understood that a difficult conversation with Her Highness was ahead, while the boy was trying to figure out what Melilla was interested in. The princess soothingly asked him not to worry. She added that she didn't bite and sincerely wanted to express her gratitude. The girl bowed gracefully and said that only thanks to the brave young man's actions had she escaped great danger. Expressing her sincere gratitude, the princess added warm words of thanks, emphasizing the significance of the act. She asked the hero to give his name so that she could later publicly express her gratitude to him. However, Rito tried to decline the offer, citing modesty. The boy believed that revealing his name was dangerous, as excessive attention would attract unnecessary questions about his past. He asked Her Majesty to forgive him for his apparent rudeness, explaining that he was forced to keep his own name secret. The audience saw how the hero, having apologized beforehand, instantly disappeared into space, leaving everyone in bewilderment. Rito told his friend that he was incredibly tired. Owen claimed that he was very scared, asking if he had used teleportation, to which he replied that he had simply snuck up on him. The adventurer resigned himself to the situation, considering his comrade to be truly amazing. But he asked him to stop. Rito insisted on leaving for the gathering place as soon as possible. Owen did not understand the reason for such a rush. Bader felt very irritated because he tried to engage in dialogue, but was simply ignored. At the Imperial Vocational School, a woman announced that the written examination was about to begin. Introducing herself as Gilm, a major general in the Imperial Army, she announced that she had been assigned to oversee the examination procedures. Gilm continued, explaining that they had 3 hours to complete the work. They would write their answers to the assignments on a special form, and at the end of the exam, she would collect their work, as with a regular test. The general warned that she hoped the students understood that cheating was strictly prohibited, and that if anyone tried to cheat, they would be punished accordingly. In addition, she emphasized that the use of magic is strictly prohibited in order to objectively assess the real knowledge of the subjects. The briefing ended, and the general asked if the students had any questions. At this point, Beethoven quietly used magical techniques, trying to make it easier for himself to pass the test. The manipulations were carried out covertly, avoiding the direct observation of the teacher. His subordinates asked if it was risky to use telepathy, since the observer had forbidden the use of magic. The master reassured them, saying that telepathy was difficult to detect, and no one would guess that they were using advanced magic. They agreed with the commander's arguments. The group decided that working together and using telepathy would make the exam easier. Bader urged his comrades to follow the plan and not fall behind. The combined strength of the 3 allies guaranteed the success of the operation, minimizing the chance of cheating being detected. Rito felt a strange movement of magical energy coming from the table next to him. Experience told him that this was a sign of some illegal interference. Mistrust and vigilance made the young man wary. Gilm announced that since there were no questions, the exam would begin. The students got ready and began completing their assignments. Rito realized that the exam was testing knowledge of culture, laws, history, war, ethics, and strategy. He couldn't let his emotions get in the way of his concentration in answering the questions successfully. The first task was to write the official name of the empire. The guy was pleasantly surprised to find the first task extremely simple. He was surprised that even basic knowledge was tested in the exam. Realizing that it was too early to relax, Rito returned to the tasks, understanding that the next questions would be more difficult than the previous ones. The young man decided to demonstrate his abilities and show what he was really capable of. The clock solemnly struck the appointed hour, announcing the end of the examination test. Giln announced that the exam was over, asked them to put down their pens and hand in their forms, and informed them that applicants would learn the result after the practical exam. Ruto found the exam very difficult. Owen asked his friend how he did on the exam. Ruto explained that at first it all seemed easy and that's why he relaxed. Then it became difficult to finish on time. Owen noted that this is unusual for him. The friend continued that the final tasks were quite difficult and suggested that the exam conditions were as close as possible to a real combat operation. Owen literally froze in place when he heard those words. His eyes widened, his breath caught, and his heart began to beat faster. Ruto, noticing his friend's expressive look, also became noticeably nervous. Owen asked him if he wanted to say that he had answered all the questions. Ruto admitted that he had indeed completed all the tasks, considering it part of the exam. Owen said that he seemed to have deliberately decided to laugh at him, emphasizing that initially it was necessary to answer at least half of the questions. He continued that to pass the exam, you only need to answer a third of the questions correctly, and if you manage to answer half or 2/3 of the questions in the allotted time, then that is quite enough. The guy knew perfectly well that his friend had read all of these books. That's why he was sincerely puzzled as to why he had never looked at the guide to this exam, which contained all the important information. After all, it said what number of correct answers guaranteed successful completion of the exam. But Ruto objected strongly, saying that he remembered the contents of the manual well and had read it last specifically to remember it as fully as possible. This statement confused Owen, and he found it hard to believe that his friend was so smart. However, in the end he calmed down, convinced that nothing terrible had happened and the theoretical part had been passed successfully. In addition, the next stage of the tests would soon come, the practical exam, for which, apparently, the comrade was also perfectly prepared. While the friends were chatting quietly, Ruta suggested making the next exam a real challenge in trying to surpass themselves. Suddenly, the examiner approached them. She asked him if he had used any magic the night before the exam. The young man was confused, not understanding at all what the woman was talking about. His heart was beating faster, his thoughts were confused, and no suitable answer came to mind. Gilman added that she was completely confused because he had answered all the questions absolutely correctly and had completed the initial tasks brilliantly. Owen was also shocked to hear this. She continued, noting that the boy had also answered the last questions correctly, suggesting that he would have the highest score. The general emphasized that there were very few people in the entire empire who had managed to pass the exam so successfully. In addition, the woman noted that in the entire history of the academy, only a few have demonstrated such a level of skill. Even she herself finds it difficult to believe in the reality of what happened, given the incredible complexity of the questions asked. Therefore, Giln officially notified Ruto that she was obligated to conduct an inspection, wanting to personally verify whether magic was used during the exam. The young man stood there, shocked to the depths of his soul by the unfounded accusations. Owen was next to him, his eyes expressing complete bewilderment and sympathy for his friend. The boys felt vulnerable and lost. faced with the unpleasant truth. He wondered what to do next. Ruto was thinking about how to act so that his points would not be lowered, and he understood that it was almost impossible to prove that he had not used magic. It would be difficult to convince the committee that he had not used magic. It would be difficult to convince the committee that he had not cheated. Bader turned to the examiner, politely asking permission to offer his own solution to the problem at hand. The silence in the room grew tense. All eyes turned to the boy, waiting for what this student would say. Bader added that he saw with his own eyes how Ruto used magic to cheat. Gilnan asked him if he confirmed his words and if he actually saw the use of magic. Owen desperately tried to defend his friend, trying to make arguments for his friend's honesty. His voice was shaking with emotion, so he didn't say anything coherent. Bader firmly confirmed his words, adding that he says this as the fifth son of the noble Myrto family. Owen froze in place, not believing his ears. The idea of his best friend being publicly accused of cheating seemed ridiculous and impossible. He turned to the accuser, curious to find out whether the accusation made was genuine and well-founded, or whether it arose by chance or mistake. This question reflected a deep distrust of the statement heard, showing a desire to understand the truth of the incident. Beto replied that he was absolutely serious in his statement and they could confirm that there was no mistake. Riddle understood that he was finished and in huge trouble. Owen asked the accused to stop talking nonsense, claiming that it was all a lie and that his friend had always acted honestly. The examiner insistently demanded that Bader clearly explain on what basis he concluded that the young man was cheating. The atmosphere in the room grew tense. Everyone was waiting for the outcome, realizing that Ruto's fate depended on the credibility of the witness's testimony. Bader chuckled and remembered that Giln herself had said that it was impossible to pass this exam with a perfect score. In that case, it was obvious that Ruto had been cheating. Owen ardently defended his friend, convincingly arguing that the reason for his success lay solely in hard work and talent, and not at all in the help of magical powers. The general confirmed that the test was designed to make it impossible to answer all the questions correctly, and Bader's assumption about the use of magic seemed quite reasonable. However, she immediately corrected herself, explaining that reaching the maximum was still possible, albeit an incredibly rare event. Ruto noticeably cheered up, hearing this important remark, gaining hope for a favorable outcome of the investigation. The woman added that in the past there had been cases where individual students had given correct answers to all the questions on the exam, demonstrating exceptional ability and diligence. Since the founding of the academy, the number of such outstanding personalities has been insignificant. Each of them left a deep mark on the history of the great empire, becoming legends of their time. Gillen continued to reason, noting that usually such genius students are extremely rare, but Ruto did not possess such outstanding qualities as his legendary predecessors. The examiner realized that she had rushed to conclusions, and now she might have to reconsider her opinion. She warned Bader, reminding him of the reference to his family tree, and expressed the hope that the young man would remain true to his word, for to renounce it would mean shame for the entire family. Bader confirmed that he would not renounce his words. The woman carefully analyzed his arguments, comparing the facts and listening to the opinions of the parties. Having weighed all the circumstances, she came to a conclusion. Gillen tactfully invited Ruto to a private meeting, intending to objectively assess his abilities. Feeling guilty for the suspicions that had arisen, she sincerely apologized to the young man for the inconvenience caused. And she added that after various studies, another exam would be held. Ruto agreed and realized that he was in trouble and was hesitant about keeping calm. Her Majesty addressed those around her politely, but with a hint of authority, inviting them to wait before drawing conclusions. Everyone immediately turned to look at her. And she, like Malila Lee Laguastard, said that she would like to say something, if the general would allow her. The woman allowed her to speak, acknowledging that her opinion was important. The girl openly defended Ruto, solemnly assuring the examiner that the young student was pure of heart and not involved in the use of prohibited methods. Ruto froze in place, shocked by the girl's unexpected statement. Bader stood motionless, shocked and confused. He did not understand why Malila was defending the boy, since her testimony could destroy his own position. He was about to dispute the statement, but suddenly he stopped, overwhelmed by the sudden realization that he might be wrong. His lips continued to move silently. The words caught in his throat, creating a painful feeling of shame and guilt. The girl gently asked what he wanted to say, receiving a laconic answer that nothing. Heated and furious, Bader shouted loudly that, as the fifth representative of the glorious Mert family, he personally witnessed Ruto resort to magic to illegally gain an advantage in the exam. The princess confirmed with icy certainty that the story she had told sounded familiar and matched the popular rumors. The cold glint in the princess's eyes warned of severe consequences if the evidence was insufficient. Beitor did not understand why Her Majesty was then defending the alleged offender. The general urged him to calm down and listen to her explanation, but Bader's excitement had reached its peak and he continued to passionately try to get a remark in, ignoring calls for order. When he asked why, Malila replied that she saw it through magic. The entire audience stood frozen in awe, exchanging frightened glances. Gillen explained that Her Highness was an excellent magician. For this ability, the princess was assigned to monitor the abuse of magic, and during the exam, she monitored magic, recording those who used it. Malila explained that representatives of families that have demonstrated outstanding success in the study of magic are exempt from participating in this exam. She came to this exam despite belonging to the imperial family. She wondered if she looked helpless, to which Bader hesitantly answered in the negative. He vigorously denied what he had seen, claiming that he did not recall such an incident and admitted the possibility of error, suggesting a possible delusion or accidental confusion. Malila categorically rejected the doubts, confirming that the detection of magic clearly revealed his magical powers, eliminating any possibility of error. Bader refused to believe what he heard, internally resisting the obviousness of the fact and considering it possible that there might be a flaw in the girl's magic. She asked him knowingly if he wanted to repeat the experiment an unlimited number of times, emphasizing the invariability of the result no matter how many times it was tested. Bader rushed to object impulsively, trying to restore his lost reputation, but he was interrupted by a sharp shout, ordering him to shut up immediately, adding that there were no buts. Malila firmly stated that there was no point in making excuses for trying to cheat on the exam, since the evidence had already been obtained and confirmed by reliable observation methods. She categorically stated that the three candidates would be immediately disqualified from further qualifying tests, forever losing the right to apply for high ranks. The examiner looked sadly at the young men, sighing heavily. Her gaze expressed both regret and disappointment at the tragic loss of prospects for future generations. The rest of the guys were also watching the events unfold, holding their breath. The mood in the audience became tense. The atmosphere was thick with tension and anxiety. Bader's subordinates hurriedly appealed to him with a request to take urgent steps because the situation was rapidly deteriorating. People were in a state of deep confusion, not knowing what actions to take to correct the catastrophic situation. Their master was visibly angry, his anger distorting his face, giving him a frightening appearance. The princess watched his emotional state carefully, then asked if he had any additional comments or objections that could affect the course of the matter. Bader growled in rage that the accusations were slander, defaming the honor and dignity of his family. The blood pulsed in his veins, his body tensed, his muscles cramped, his breathing quickened, turning ordinary conversation into a stormy stream of incoherent curses. He shouted that simply based on the result of Verto's work, he considered his success impossible and believed that he could not be wrong in his arguments. Bader continued to argue excitedly that all the participants in the trial had conspired to humiliate him. According to him, this was an open insult, as a result of which he had no other way but to defend his honor. The tension of the situation reached a critical point when he made the fateful decision to prove his innocence on his own. The princess looked at him intently, at a loss to guess what strategy of behavior would emerge next. Burning with the thirst for justice, Bator officially announced that he was challenging Verto to a duel designed to determine the true winner in an intellectual competition. The announcement of the duel caused a real furor among the listeners. All those present froze in tension, turning pale from fear and excitement. The gentleman demanded silence, firmly declaring that he was not going to give in and would prove the falsity of the accusations by any means necessary, restoring the honor of his name. Verto stood motionless like a statue, his gaze directed over the heads of the students crowded around him. He looked around in confusion, not understanding why his perfect life had collapsed into an abyss of accusations. A duel is an ancient custom introduced by aristocrats to determine a winner. Both participants put their family honor on the line, after which the decisive battle begins. The real battle is fought to the bitter end. The strong remain, the weak leave. If one of the participants is from a military family, a system is used to maintain the balance of power. Verto knew the rules of the duel very well, as he had recently successfully passed a difficult exam on the history of the country's traditions and customs. The knowledge he had gained helped him understand the essence of the ritual and prepare himself mentally for a potential clash. Despite his knowledge of historical foundations, he realized that the old times had long since passed, leaving only the memory of the great legacy of his ancestors. Malila explained that it had been 100 years since the last official duel. The opponents often had different skill levels, and the duels were very risky, which was a problem. Laws gradually developed and a judicial system emerged, so duels are no longer practiced. She explained that duels were originally intended exclusively for members of the upper class, ensuring the maintenance of order and honor among the nobility. The princess rightly pointed out that Verto did not belong to any noble family, and therefore had no right to participate in the traditional duel, which was a privilege reserved exclusively for titled persons. Malila believed that a challenge to a duel would not ease the pain of defeat and regarded Bader's actions as an overly selfish act of revenge. Bader himself took the criticism indifferently, confident in the correctness of his chosen path to restore honor. The history of duels was of no importance to him, since the consent of both parties was considered a prerequisite, and any disagreements concerned only the opponents, Bader boldly challenged Verto to a fair fight, promising to publicly admit his opponent's innocence if the latter won. He issued an ultimatum that if he won, his opponent must publicly admit the crime and voluntarily leave the state. The crowd froze in shock, their gazes fixed on the participants in the drama. The quiet noise grew into a deep silence, broken only by the rapid beating of hearts. Owen snorted in disdain, considering the proposal pure madness. Berwerto unexpectedly supported the idea, announcing his agreement to accept the terms of the duel. He dismissively called his opponent a weakling, publicly declaring his acceptance of the challenge. His expression turned steely and his voice became firmer and stronger, demonstrating his readiness to fight to the end. Owen cried out in amazement, astonished by his friend's audacity, specifying that duels had been formally abolished, but were still in effect, and that defeat meant exile. He wondered if his friend didn't understand that. Rudo smiled warmly, glad of his friend's concern, but reminded him that the cause of all the troubles was the suspicion of cheating, which he himself provoked. Instead of making excuses, the young man chose to honestly look reality in the eye, accepting responsibility for what happened. Owen sighed heavily, reluctantly agreeing with his friend's arguments. Gilman worriedly asked if he was sure of his decision, since if he lost, he would be punished for a crime he did not commit. Ruto assured her that it was okay, since he had already caused her and the princess a lot of trouble, and it would be worse if she interfered again. Moreover, he emphasized that he had no desire to fail. Deep down, he firmly believed in his luck and skill, preparing himself for an uncompromising fight to regain his lost reputation. The general noted that his refusal to try to justify himself was evidence of his firm intention to fight to the end. The woman understood that it was now practically impossible to stop the process, and the matter would take an uncontrollable turn. Gilm categorically forbade the killing of opponents, allowing only a symbolic duel, the winner of which must be determined according to the established rules of the tournament. The rules require the identification of a clear leader who could undoubtedly gain the upper hand over his opponent. The general made it clear that no compromise or truce was envisaged. The duel must identify the strongest. Her voice was firm and clear, and she said, considering the circumstances, would he agree to follow the terms of their agreement? The pause dragged on, the audience waiting for an answer, each holding their breath, realizing the magnitude of the test ahead. This meant that the final duel would take place at the next practical exam, where the students would demonstrate their fighting skills and combat tactics. Only there, as part of the training event, was it allowed to hold an official duel aimed at identifying the strongest. This news left everyone in a state of shock. Those present looked at her silently, not believing their ears. Only Rurto remained deathly silent, staring at his interlocutor, trying to understand what awaited him ahead. The young man's fate hung in the balance, and his future depended on defeating his rival. He was confused, not understanding the essence of what was happening. A duel in practice seemed absurd, because the educational process was based on the development of skills and not on the manifestation of aggression. Meanwhile, Malilla supported the proposal, explaining that the test would be a kind of exam. According to the princess, the inclusion of a duel in the exam program allowed the formalities of the educational process to be observed, giving the event an official character. Such a measure guaranteed compliance with the regulations, and prevented the violation of established norms of student behavior. The girls sincerely believed that the students would be treated with equal respect during the exam, regardless of their origin or status. For her, such a practice was a guarantee of fairness and transparency of the assessment procedure. She asked Ruto if he had changed his mind and was told no. Gillen turned to Bator, asking his opinion, and heard a calm answer that he saw no reason to object. The entire audience watched the dialogue tensely, realizing that any change in the conditions could change the outcome of the duel. Thus, all preliminary agreements and conditions of the future fight were established and accepted by the parties. The participants decided to move on, focusing on preparation for the important event. Gillen decreed that the unofficial duel would take place during a practical exam to test candidates' readiness to become junior officers. She decided to explain the structure of the exam again, focusing on the key stages. The rules of the competition are very simple. Two opponents enter the arena. They are given exactly 20 minutes to demonstrate their best martial arts skills. The winner is the one who first lands a precise blow, knocking the opponent out of action. Each participant in the exam takes part in a training fight in an arena, fenced with a barrier and protective magic. To avoid injuries, protective spells are in effect in the arena. Additionally, to ensure safety in scoring, each pair is assigned a separate teacher. Bader explained to Ruto that a staged duel was planned and praised the Major General for the originality of the idea. Since the event was held under the close attention of numerous observers, the chances of fraud were reduced to a minimum. Any violation would lead to immediate exposure and severe punishment. Bader sarcastically told Ruto that he did not understand why the princess liked him, but now that would come to an end. There was undisguised hatred in his voice. Outraged and hurt, he made a firm decision to reveal his potential, make his enemy forget about his misdeed, and praise his talents. From the first meeting, Bader felt a strong antipathy towards Ruto, considering him an upstart and an imposter. Envy and jealousy pushed him to dangerous actions, giving birth to a crazy idea to destroy his competitor and turn his ambitious plans into dust. Gillen addressed the examinees, making sure everyone was ready, and solemnly spoke the key words, beginning the test. The atmosphere instantly changed. The tension increased. Everyone froze in anticipation of the grand event. The opponents took up positions, and Bader, as soon as the referee's signal sounded, immediately rushed into the attack. Ruto instantly recognized a familiar move, second-class ice magic boost attack. He had encountered similar tricks before, but now he came to the conclusion that his opponent was indeed a good mage. Waving his wand, Bator shouted angrily, demanding that an ice shard be thrown with special force and precision at the enemy. A huge chunk of ice, sparkling with crystals, flew swiftly towards Ruto, cutting through the air with a hissing sound. The wizard tensed, ready to meet the threat, concentrating on defense. The attack happened so quickly that the reaction had to be immediate. At the last moment, he moved to the right, dodging the deadly projectile. The crunch of ice was heard as it shattered on the arena ground. The two fighters looked at each other for a long time, hiding their inner anxiety behind masks of cold calm. The frozen tension did not last long. Bader was the first to break down, letting out a short laugh that sounded like the creaking of a rusty mechanism. He carefully studied the enemy's behavior, highly appreciating the speed of reactions and the agility of maneuvers. Reflecting on the reasons for an action, the magician began to analyze the situation, trying to identify a weakness or a chance for an attack. Bader menacingly promised that the first attack was just a warm-up. The next attack promised to be much more dangerous, provoking the enemy to test his reflexes and agility. The new attack missed its target like a bird flashing across the sky. The magic dissipated into a cloud of tiny flames that rained down on the ground like sparks. After 2 unsuccessful attacks, a new, deeper pause was established between the participants. They froze a few meters away from each other, studying the reaction of the enemy, looking for signs of fatigue or vulnerability. Bader's face took on an earthy hue. His skin became covered in sweat. His breathing quickened, acquiring an uneven rhythm. He began to shout that Ruto had dodged his spells twice, and although it was hard for him, he found a reason to praise his opponent. However, a question arose inside him. Why didn't his opponent take any active actions? And he added that this was only 1/10 of his real strength. Now it became clear to him that the guy was afraid of him, standing motionless and not even daring to move. Bader happily declared that it was now clear who was stronger, and asked Ruto what he would say. Because if you wanted to surrender, then now was the best time. The sight of the enemy's indifferent face enraged the magician, giving rise to the thought that fear had paralyzed the enemy's will, depriving him of the ability to resist attacks. Negative emotions reached their peak. Bader became completely disillusioned with his opponent. Deciding to end the farce, he activated the secret war spell Ice Lotus. Gil impatiently asked Ruto to stop his idleness and defeat the enemy. Simultaneously with the beginning of Bator's attack, Ruto performed an elegant dance step, easily dodging the blow. With a slight movement of his hand, the young man ended the duel, sealing his victory. The blow was precise and powerful, completely paralyzing the opponent's body. He fell to his knees, gasping for air, unable to control his limbs. Pain pierced his body. His consciousness became cloudy. His vision became foggy. His vision became foggy, turning bright colors into a gray veil. The atmosphere of the arena changed instantly. Students and mentors turned to the battlefield, captivated by the skill of the winner. Owen stood out among the jubilant crowd, enthusiastically congratulating his friend with a smile on his well-deserved victory. Gillen solemnly announced that Ruto had successfully passed all the obstacles of the exam, earning the rank of junior officer. She congratulated the student. Continuing to congratulate him, the woman good-naturedly noted that, frankly speaking, she did not expect a different outcome, trusting the young man's professionalism. The general stressed that both participants had the right to take the exam based on their performance, but given the incident, she could not allow Bader to take the test. Addressing Ruto, the woman apologized for the trouble she had caused. Emotionally moved, she emphasized that he had once again managed to prove his innocence, rising above all doubts and accusations. Owen watched his friend's behavior with interest, discovering that in the midst of the general bustle the fight had already ended, and his opponent was worried about the condition of his master. Having realized the real picture of what was happening, the young man decided with relief that now he could not hold back his strength. The servant reported that their agent had sent an important report. Kirikou was glad that she had finally found it. She realized where Rita was now. The princess met the boy about 10 years ago when she moved to live in an orphanage. It was there that they began communicating with each other. Rito approached his grandmother and said that he would take everything back to its place. The kind woman, smiling tenderly, thanked him for his help, proud of his growing up and independence. The adults, with a gentle smile and warmth in their hearts, admired the actions of the little helper, who happily carried out the grandmother's instructions. Their looks expressed pride and love, filling the spacious living room with the light of home warmth and mutual understanding. Mr. Brain spoke highly of him, emphasizing his incredible work ethic and discipline. He noted Rito's unusual maturity and efficiency, wondering if the boy was always so active. The grandmother took the remark as, roughly speaking, considering herself his assistant now, rather than him hers. She noted that the boy has to perform many duties: cleaning the premises, washing clothes, making up the menu, caring for the plants, putting the children to bed, inspecting the territory and equipment, delivering goods to the administration. The interlocutor admired the teenager's ability to work. The grandmother proudly reported that the afternoon tea that delighted the man was also collected and brewed by a little helper. The discovery amazed the visitor. The child combined the duties of a gardener, cleaner, cook, and organizer of leisure, while remaining cheerful and active. Wanting to clarify, the woman tried to add details to the story. But Kirikou, tired of discussing children's duties, quietly left, heading to the toilet to take a break from the adult conversation. The girl stopped near the door of the next room, feeling an irresistible curiosity. As she passed the kitchen, she noticed Rito busy with his work, carefully arranging the plates. The girl turned to him, trying to get his attention. He looked up and saw the princess coming in. Meeting this charming person was a real surprise for him. Rito asked curiously if the girl had arrived alone without an escort. Kiriko confidently replied that everything was fine and that if she did not linger, she would not displease the escort. The girl stood motionless, studying the boy's face with attentive eyes. He stood motionless, looking at her, and chanted. Rito quickly apologized to her, blushing and explaining that he was burning trash, which is why his clothes were dirty. The girl was surprised, thinking that he was doing ordinary cleaning. Having decided to clarify the situation, the princess carefully approached the boy and decided to ask if she could ask him a question, to which she received an affirmative answer. She looked at him carefully, then cautiously inquired about the reasons for his diligence. She wanted to understand what made him constantly work without rest or entertainment. Kiriko wondered in surprise if he was being threatened, trying to please his superiors, or just showing off his usefulness. Rito quietly asked to stop asking questions. He didn't understand what she was talking about and thought the girl was talking too fast. If she meant help, then everything was fine. No one was threatening him, and he wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone. The boy helped people because he enjoyed the process. Simple words of gratitude served as the best reward. Working selflessly, he accumulated positive impressions, moving towards his main goal in life, to bring good to others. The princess opened her mouth vigorously, intending to express disagreement, but the words stuck in her throat. Her attempts to formulate a counter-argument failed, leaving her in a state of complete confusion. She asked him if he was tired of the constant work, since she herself would have refused the imposed duties. Rito thoughtfully explained that work was necessary for society, and someone had to take on the responsibilities. He was used to thinking about the needs of others without expecting rewards or recognition. Kiriko confirmed the boy's words, but emphasized that she herself was not obliged to do household chores, since this was the responsibility of adults. She asked if adults were not supposed to do this, to care, to help, to teach until the children grow up. After all, in her opinion, the job of an adult is to be an example for the younger generation. At this time, Brain was actively looking for her, wondering where she had disappeared to. Rito gently noted that the princess cared for adults, finding it paradoxical. His childish logic did not accept the division of responsibilities by age, considering helping a natural human trait, available to everyone regardless of life circumstances. However, the boy looked at the girl with admiration, enchanted by her. For Kiriko, on the contrary, this state of affairs seemed like a nightmare. He thought with admiration that the girl was undoubtedly smart, but he realized that he was far from such intelligence because she was a princess. She, hearing the compliment, coquettishly exclaimed that of course he was far from it, with such a face, and asked him to move away so as not to stain her clothes with dirty hands. The boy asked her for forgiveness, explaining that he was simply nervous and needed to choose his words more carefully. Rito explained that he had not considered the subtleties of social interactions, neglecting the nuances of etiquette and not thinking about the feelings of the interlocutor. His thinking remained primitive, focused on the simple transfer of information, without taking into account the emotional background and context. One man once told him, "Become a good person." The man continued to give advice, instructing the boy to care not only for his loved ones, but also for strangers. According to his philosophy, by making others happy, a person receives personal happiness and inner satisfaction in return. These important words remained in Rito's memory forever, even though the source of the saying had long been forgotten. The phrases, "like a spell," guided the boy's life, reminding him of the need to share kindness and support others. That's why he put in the maximum effort, working and helping others. Kiriko understood the importance of what he said, but she did not understand what exactly he expected from her. She recognized the wisdom of the advice, but internally rejected it, considering it childish naivety to blindly trust simple truths. Admiring material wealth and power, the girl saw in the boy only a pitiful figure, incapable of comprehending the true pleasures of life. A strange sensation arose in her chest, disconcerting her. She could not explain the nature of these feelings that arose every time she looked at him. Kiriko froze in indecision, not understanding why her thoughts kept returning to Rito. The mystery of his attractiveness bothered her, causing curiosity and a little anxiety. The door swung open and an agitated man rushed into the room, clutching his head. He was shouting for the princess. Little Kirikou looked at the approaching adult with bewilderment and slight irritation, feeling a restriction of freedom and an invasion of personal space. Brain shouted that he had searched for her and did not understand how she could leave without saying anything. He already thought that he would never find her. The girl asked him to leave her alone. Having finished his monologue, the man turned his gaze to the boy standing nearby, who gave him a wide smile. Brain smiled cautiously, deciding to change the subject. He kindly asked if he had heard the name of his new acquaintance correctly. Rito Lilu. The boy smiled, realizing his mistake. He respectfully apologized for missing the introduction protocol. The kid was sincerely repentant, realizing the importance of maintaining decency and respect for elders. A second later, the man's expression changed, looking at the kid with suspicion. In a stern tone, he asked what they were doing together in the closed room. Rito, understanding the guard's concerns, explained that they were just talking, not doing anything reprehensible. The stern guard increased the pressure, threatening unpleasant consequences for any attempts to violate security protocol. The threat sounded serious, causing the boy to feel uneasy and anxious. Kiriko resolutely declared that she intended to take the boy she liked to the palace, making him a permanent resident. Rito froze, listening to the conversations, feeling anxiety creeping up on him. The prospect of moving to the palace frightened the boy, causing internal protest and doubt about his own future. Shocked by the news, the man raised his voice, trying to understand why the little princess suddenly wanted to adopt a stranger's child. His heart was beating faster. His breathing became intermittent. His brain was feverishly searching for a rational explanation for what was happening. The princess, having listened to his story, realized that the desire to help other people was his main character trait. She called him a weirdo who always strives to help others and offered a solution to the problem. The boy tried to justify himself and object, but the words stuck in his throat. After much deliberation, Kiriko made a decision that Rito would become her personal assistant from today onwards. The girl smiled slyly, slightly squinting her blue eyes, and watched the boy's reaction with curiosity. The new duties frightened and excited him at the same time, and yet he was worried about his future service to the princess. The princess's offer pleasantly surprised Rito, but inside he felt a little anxious. Moving to the palace meant a radical change in his usual way of life, a loss of independence and the comfort of his home. The boy was haunted by the fear of being superfluous and unnecessary. Over Kirik's shoulder he noticed his grandmother smiling encouragingly from afar. She and the other children in the orphanage also looked at him with support, as if sending him good luck. His heart filled with warmth when he realized that his loved ones believed in him and supported him in his new endeavor. Feeling the support of his family and friends, the boy relaxed, freed from the burden of doubts and fears. The heaviness on his shoulders disappeared. His chest freely filled with air. His inner energy returned. The surrounding atmosphere of smiles and approval gave him confidence. Rito collected his thoughts and nodded firmly, agreeing to become the princess's personal assistant. The new position promised interesting adventures and an introduction to the world of high officials and court intrigues. He sincerely thanked Kiriko for her trust, assured her, and promised to try his best from now on as her personal assistant. Having said this, the young man sighed with relief, feeling joy from his own courage and bravery. The girl thought the answer was excellent, said affably that she was welcome to the palace, and told Brain to show him around when he returned home. Rito would rest today and would start work tomorrow morning. While the man agreed to carry out the order, she thought about what else she could come up with for the assistant's duties. Additional instructions included a morning greeting followed by a detailed survey about sleep quality and bed comfort. The list of duties was supplemented by daily tea serving, timely provision of warm clothes in cool weather. The princess required constant attention and interest in her person, forcing the assistant to learn flexibility and adaptation. Kiriko stretched lazily, barely touching the edge of the curtain with her fingers, slightly pushing the fabric aside. Opening her eyes, the princess discovered that Rito was missing. The room appeared before the girl's eyes, cold and empty, deprived of the presence of her beloved assistant. The absence of the usual sounds of footsteps and the noise of making a drink created the illusion of an abandoned space. The silence was oppressive, making her feel abandoned. Rage flared up in the princess's heart, instantly displacing the remnants of drowsiness. Kiriko's screams tore through the silence of the palace, her disgruntled tones echoing through the corridors. The word fool was directed at an absent assistant. Her heart was pounding wildly, distorting her face with anger and disappointment. The main character looks ahead in surprise. He gets up from his bed and asks himself if it is morning already. Someone approaches and addresses him. The protagonist turns to the person who approached him. The young man congratulates Rito on waking up. The protagonist is happy about Avon's presence. The man, meanwhile, looks tired and slightly out of breath early in the morning. The man says that the main character's face shows that he thought he was lazy and wouldn't get up so early in the morning. The young man is surprised. He really didn't expect to wake up so early, especially after yesterday's tiring day. The man sees his reaction and says that he hit the nail on the head. The man says he is used to getting up early in the morning. He adds that this habit, dating back to his days as an adventurer, makes him feel energetic. However, he did not think that he would wake up and see the sleeping body of the protagonist. The young man laughs and says that he overslept a little today. He had a dream. It was a dream when he met Lady Princess Killick. He remembers her look, full of hope and sadness at the same time, as if she was carrying the weight of the whole world on her shoulders. The protagonist remembers his dream and asks himself, why did he dream it at all? It's been about a month since he left the kingdom, and he still can't forget about it, as if he has anything to regret. The man throws the protagonist some clothes and says that he has a very strange expression on his face. His thoughts are apparently reflected on his face, revealing his inner turmoil. The young man catches the robes. He must gather his thoughts and move on, because new adventures and unknown lands await him. The man tells him that you are his new form. Classes start today. He asks if the protagonist has forgotten about it. He, in turn, looks at him with longing. The young man sighs. He puts on new clothes. The young man says that, of course, he hasn't forgotten about it. After all, his new life is just beginning, and he's going to enjoy it to the fullest. There's genuine enthusiasm in his voice. He's ready to take on any challenge, ready to take risks and move forward, regardless of obstacles. The man smirks at his words and his new life. He says that it's a bit of a stretch, although perhaps the protagonist is right. His smirk is ironic, but also shows a bit of respect for youthful ardor. The heroes decide to show what they are capable of. They are ready to prove to the world that they are capable of much, that a great future awaits them. Both characters headed to the educational institution. They entered spacious classrooms where the protagonist was suddenly called out by a melodic female voice. The young man turned around and froze, seeing Her Majesty Malilia in front of him. The girl looked at him with disarming kindness and slight naivety in her eyes. Her gaze showed genuine surprise and undisguised joy at the unexpected meeting. She says she hasn't seen him for a long time. They've seen each other often lately to go through the necessary procedure. Despite the ghetto, the heroine feels like they parted ways an eternity ago. He apologizes for having to bother the protagonist so often because of the procedures for acquiring temporary citizenship, the procedure for admission, and many others. The young man looked at the girl in surprise, as if he couldn't believe that there was a real princess in front of him. His gaze slid over her figure, noting the strict silhouette of her school uniform. He didn't have time to ask a question, as Malilia, noticing his gaze, smiled and nodded. The heroine confirms his assumption, saying that she also studies here. Naturally, she is dressed in a uniform. The heroine asks if the young man is really so surprised by this fact. The young man answers that he is very much so. He says that it is difficult not to be surprised by this. He says he's surprised he even met her at this academy. Besides, who does everyone know that the princess would be in such a uniform? The protagonist asks if she really thinks it's possible to predict that. The heroine agrees. However, she says that she's not here only to surprise him. This academy trains soldiers, in other words, the closest place to the battlefield, as he knows. This country is currently at war with the Republic of Celestia in the south. I will have to participate in the war one way or another, since she is a princess. But Princess says that's why she decided to study military science, and this academy seemed like the best option, and she decided to test the waters. The protagonist is surprised by how detailed she explained everything. He is amazed by her ability to adapt. But was it necessary to approach him? Of course, he understands that she has no sense of personal space in keeping a distance. But it's not just that. He clearly attracts too much attention. And if you remember that he was involved in all sorts of troubles, mostly because of Pedora. Although, if you look at it from the other side, her presence can be useful. He hopes that the princess will not cause him problems. Of course, this is only the best case scenario. If he can live quietly and peacefully next to the princess, he will be able to enjoy peace. Since entering this country, he has already been in a lot of trouble. Maybe now he will be able to live a quiet life? Someone addresses the main character by name. He turns around, finding himself face to face with the girl. The young man is frightened by such a close distance. His heart beats faster, his cheeks flush. He did not expect such sudden closeness. He addresses Her Highness, stammering with emotion, saying that she is too close. She says that he simply did not hear her, so she decided to call him in this way. She says that there is nothing to be done, so she will repeat it again. Now they are classmates with the main character. This means that they are on the same level. The heroine says that he must now address her as her, otherwise the girl will stop calling her simply Malilia. She clearly enjoys the protagonist's confusion. The young man is very nervous and says that it is impossible. The very idea of addressing the princess by name seems blasphemous. The princess turns to Aven and asks what he will say. He also answers that he does not imagine this is possible. Aven, the protagonist's best friend, looks no less dumbfounded. Another person joins the dialogue. He asks for forgiveness. The young man standing behind the princess smiles from under his brows. He gallantly takes her hand and kisses it. He says it is a great honor for him to meet Her Highness. The stranger says his name is Geek von Kalm. He is the first son of Count Kalm. The young man says he is honored to greet the girl as a class representative. Geek von Kalm, despite his young age, carries himself with a confidence worthy of his lineage. Carries himself with a confidence worthy of his lineage. The heroine thanks him for his kindness. She is glad that she has responsible classmates. The protagonist and his friend freeze. They are indignant at Togo, how docile their new acquaintance is. Ivan asks if this sly fellow has accidentally fallen ill. Meanwhile, the protagonist looks closely at his new acquaintance. It seems to him that he has heard this name somewhere before. Something elusively familiar flashed in his facial features and manner of speaking. Suddenly, the Count's son's face changed. He bared his teeth like a predator. His gaze flashed with undisguised hostility, as if standing before him was not a new acquaintance, but a sworn enemy. The smile, which had seemed quite friendly before, turned into a malicious grin. The protagonist was a little taken aback. He supposes that he imagined it. However, this is impossible. The young men do not understand why the new acquaintance is looking at him like that. His brain feverishly went through the possible reasons for such a sharp change. The young man mentally tells himself to exhale and assess the situation. If he thinks about it, there might be a reason. Most likely, it's all because of the princess. She's been showing him signs of attention lately, and perhaps this has hurt the pride of the high-born young man. The young man guesses that for some reason she became friends with him. Moreover, their classmate is an imperial aristocrat. The princess remembers the main character and tries to introduce him to her new acquaintance. She says that this is Rito Lilu. Although the main character is not from their lands, he has a sharp mind and has good fighting skills. He's one of the people who got a high result. But the entrance. The classmate's face changes again. The protagonist understands that there will be problems with him. In general, this is expected. On the other hand, what surprises him most is that the princess does not notice his reaction. On the contrary, she has a nice conversation with her classmate and says that he is not very surprised by the news. She asks if they know the main character. The young man replies that he does not. However, the thought creeps into his head that they really might know each other. He asks you if it's possible that he actually knows him. He remembered the Kalm family before the kingdom and the empire became enemies more than 10 years ago. The aristocrats were on the kingdom's side until the very end. He remembered how a banquet was held, where both parties met. Perhaps they met then. The heroes were obliged to attend at that moment, but since they were very young, they were very bored. The noisy conversations of adults, the glitter of gold and jewelry, all this seemed meaningless and tiresome to them. The protagonist asks himself, did this young man remember him? Remembered the butler of Princess Killick? If so, then things are bad. The young man understands that he may be in danger. He tries to imagine what it might look like from a geek's perspective. First, a key figure from the kingdom sneaks into the empire. Then she immediately passes the entrance exams to the academy, where future imperial soldiers and officers are trained with high results. He makes his way to the top and wins the trust of the big shots of the empire, and thus begins to occupy high positions in the army. This all looks too suspicious. Naturally, he will consider him a spy or a double agent and, as an imperial aristocrat, will want to get rid of him. And yet the protagonist asks himself if he is right. Even if they had encountered a young geek back then, would he remember an ordinary servant? And even if he did remember that there was a butler back then, would he remember his face? Rito Lilu realizes that he is thinking too much. He needs to check it out first. Meanwhile, the aristocrat grins. He stalls and doesn't say anything directly. The protagonist begins to worry that he actually knows something. Geek gathers his thoughts to tell the truth. Tension hangs in the air. He extends his hand to the protagonist and says, as if nothing had happened, that his name is Geek, and he is pleased to meet him. The gesture was so innocent, so ordinary, that it only increased the protagonist's paranoia. Could this all be just a test? The protagonist extends his hand in response, but in his heart he understands that things are bad. This is the end of his quiet life at the academy. However, it is better not to show it for now. He answers that it is mutual and gives his name. The heroes shake hands. However, during the handshake, the main character feels something strange. It was as if 1,000 flashes of lightning passed between him and Geek. An electric discharge pierced his entire body. The people present looked at them and wondered what that sound was. Confusion was reflected on their faces, but no one dared to interrupt this strange scene. The atmosphere became tense. Rito and the stranger glared at each other like two predators ready to pounce in a deadly fight at any moment. The main character understands that what just happened was very dangerous. If he hadn't noticed, the geek could have killed him. He felt a sense of satisfaction that he had managed to block the magical attack. Another moment, and the discharge would have incinerated half of his body. Now, there were no doubts left. The young man understood that now it was possible to make a final conclusion. The new acquaintance attacked first. He knew Rito Lilu well and more stained. That he was a spy or double agent who posed a threat. In this situation, elimination was the easiest solution. This meant serious complications. In order to live peacefully in this city, Rito would have to avoid this guy at all costs. The aristocrat says that it was nice to meet you, but it is time to leave. Rito watched his every move carefully, trying to catch even the slightest hint of deception. Suddenly, his comrade blocked the aristocrat's path, gesturing for him to wait. He says that before Geek leaves quietly, he wants him to explain himself. The man is tense about this strange sound. He asks if the aristocrat is involved in this and what it was. The young man cleverly avoids answering. He pretends not to understand what strange sound is being talked about, and asks not to throw around empty accusations. The princess asks Avon what's wrong. He says it's hard to explain. But when he heard that strange sound, he felt something familiar. He learned to sense such things when he was an adventurer. The man is sure that it is hostility. The girl asks Mr. Geek what he will say. He replies that this is an unfounded accusation, and only a man's guess. The protagonist wants to stop Avon. He knows that his friend has a keen intuition, but he understands that it is inappropriate here. He turns to his comrade and says that everything is fine, and asks him to let his friend go. Geek asks him if he heard. He asks him to stop and take his hands off him. The princess asks her comrades to calm down. The protagonist asks himself what to do. His friend replies that he is not going to calm down, even if the main character says so. He doubts it, so he will continue the conversation. Suddenly, a woman appears next to them and says that they have very inexpensive students. The teacher asks if they heard the bell. All the students turn to look at her in amazement. Silence falls over the room. The students' faces, recently animated by discussion, are now frozen in silent question. The protagonist looks and does not understand. Is this really a teacher at the academy? He does not remember how and when she appeared here. There is not a single recollection of her appearance left in his memory. The young man wonders how he did not notice the approach of such a powerful magical force. The protagonist asks himself what kind of monster she is. The princess, meanwhile, apologizes for disturbing him, trying to diffuse the tense atmosphere. Instructor Iris laughs. Her laughter rings like bells throughout the room. She says that if they are so stubborn, they will learn her lessons just fine. She says that there is enough chatter for today and it is time to take their seats. As if on command, the students begin to take their seats. She says it's time to begin the practical lesson. The room goes silent. There's tension in the air, in anticipation of something new and unknown. The lesson begins. The teacher says that since they are sitting down again, she wants to discuss something with them. The teacher introduces herself. She says her name is Iris Goldwain. She's a first-class mage, scholar, and colonel of the Imperial Magic Troop. She's also, as they can see, an instructor, so they should show her respect. The girl is standing in the middle of the class. She smiles and suggests that we finish the presentation. It's time to start explaining. First, we are told that their lesson is called the practice of magic. The woman deftly swings a broom. She says that, in fact, everything is very simple. They will use magic again. She says she needs them to get used to the magic, like their fingers. They will practice until they can do it unconsciously. The teacher says that she is, of course, aware that they have already had experience using it, although perhaps these were two deadly tests. There are probably those here who pass the exams thanks to physical strength, and those who do not like magic. She knows that everyone has their own path, their own predisposition, but despite this, in this lesson they must learn to master it. Magic is not only power, but also responsibility, control, the ability to direct energy. She introduces the students to the necessary objects. The woman demonstrates her skills. The main character looks closely at the crystal object hanging in the air in front of him. His friend touches the object with his fingers, asking what kind of stone it is. It is not just a stone. It is the key to understanding magic, a tool that will help them to unlock their potential. The teacher says they are half right, but it is not just a stone. It is a piece of magic, or more precisely, a magic stone. The girl says that it has a shell and a core. She explains that if magic from outside gets into the core of this stone, it begins to emit light, but it doesn't work when they don't aim for the core. The teacher says that as they already know, their magic isn't in the shell. So to destroy the stone, they need to aim for the core. Wen sits with a tired face and barely listens to the teacher. She says that the student's task for today is to make this stone glow. The girl adds that it is not only about the stone. Also, while lighting the stone, you need to solve problems from your special collection. She shows the heroes a collection of tasks in mathematics. Students are extremely annoyed by the fact that they have to solve problems from a math book, and even from their own. The main character looks closely at the teacher. She smiles sweetly at him. In her eyes, you can read not only kindness, but also some hidden cunning. The young man feels that all this is too suspicious. There is some kind of catch here. Something in this sudden favor, in this deliberate simplicity of the tasks, in the teacher's soft tone seemed false to him. She, in turn, asks them not to worry and say that all the tasks are simple and there is nothing complicated about them. The most important thing for them today is to focus on lighting the stone. She says that she doesn't really care if the heroes make the wrong decisions, but if the stone goes out, it won't count. The teacher says that concentration is very important for the heroes here. They must not lose their composure. They will have time to learn, and then she will check the results. The young man understands that something much more important is hidden behind this apparent simplicity. Iris decisively commands the heroes to take action. A young man carefully straightens out the pages of his math problem book, but his eyes widen in surprise. Instead of the usual equations and formulas, he finds photographs of a naked girl in front of him. He, of course, expected something strange, but not that strange. He remembers that something similar happened before. Maybe the rules in this country are so strange. The protagonist tells himself that he has figured this out. He watches his classmates closely. He sees that everyone is trying to keep their cool. He is surprised, but then again, who would want to fail after going through such a journey? A chill spreads in his stomach, a premonition of something bad. Suddenly, his comrade's stone stops glowing. The world around him seems to shrink. He exclaims in horror. Are they really making fun of him? Evil sparkles dance in his eyes. He says that he cannot be indifferent to such a sight. The teacher looks at him carefully and asks if they really have a failed student already. The young man turns to the teacher and says that it is his own fault, but asks if it is acceptable to use such methods. The woman replies that she took permission to do so. She asked the girl to do this for the students, and she willingly agreed. She even said that she could undress several times for this. The hero thinks that this is already going beyond all limits. The teacher laughs and says that the student will be punished. For those who failed, they organized penalties. The aristocrat asks again. He says they have not heard of such a thing. The teacher asks them not to worry. It will not affect the student's health. She even says that this is not a penalty, but rather a natural reaction of the magic stone system. When students activate their magic, they automatically maintain a balance with the teacher's magic. But if they are distracted and the magic disappears, a backlash from her magic will occur. The protagonist asks again what this response is. Something strange starts to happen to his stone. He asks if this is normal. A young man tries to catch his breath after an explosion. He turns around and sees his comrade naked. All his classmates turn and look at him in bewilderment. The teacher says that the same thing could happen to all the other students. She says that they therefore need to be mentally prepared for such an outcome if they fail. The main character thinks she's crazy. The teacher turns to the children and asks if they can be so relaxed even now that their time is running out. She asks if it will make things more difficult for them if those who want to show themselves naked point zero. The main character swears and realizes that this is how they get into trouble. He imagined his teacher as a little inadequate, but she exceeded all his expectations. She was too strict. The teacher encourages them. She asks, who wants a penalty for 0 points in solving problems? A blinding light that he cannot explain comes out of the eyes and mouth of the protagonist's friend. The young man anxiously tries to understand where this bright light inside his friend came from and what is happening to him. The girl next to her instantly grabs her curly hair, as if it could save her from what was happening. The class erupts into chaos. One of the characters, overcome with panic, screams that the questions are killing him, not understanding how to cope with it. Noise and screams fill the room. Someone's book is bitten. Someone's skirt runs away. And children in a panic begin to find insects in their clothes. The teacher, with a satisfied smile on her face, joyfully watches the all-encompassing disgrace that unfolds before her. The protagonist, in complete confusion, realizes that he has ended up in a real hell where everything is getting out of control. Someone gets a penalty, and the one who is scared by what is happening gets the same punishment. The class is in complete chaos, where penalties cause new penalties, and eventually the situation becomes completely uncontrollable. He no longer knows how to get out of this difficult situation and what to do next, because the whole school has now plunged into the abyss of madness. To everyone's surprise, a flower appears on the princess's head. As for the main character's friend, I must admit, it's impossible to even look at him. The sight is not for the faint of heart. The young man seems to be aware that he hasn't had a penalty yet, but he won't be surprised if one happens immediately. He's prepared for anything. Suddenly, a ball of paper hits him on the back of the head. He falls onto the edge of the desk. The young man sighs in agitation. He is now in a very difficult situation. He completely forgot about the one person who would most likely try to trip him up. This is what he does, as it turns out. The aristocrat geek von Kamm. Since the beginning of the lesson, he has been slowly trying to create something in this state. The young man realizes that his opponent is not giving up. He wonders what is happening to his exam itself. Does he still have a chance to succeed? Or all his efforts doomed to failure? These questions torment him, distracting him from solving the current task. The aristocrat, meanwhile, is angry, slamming his fist on the desk. His arrogant face is distorted by a grimace of rage. There is a blank sheet of paper in front of him. The textbook is open to the first page. The protagonist looks at him and is surprised that he hasn't written anything. Is it possible that an aristocrat, with all the advantages, is unable to even begin? He asks himself, is it possible that an aristocrat is sacrificing even his grades just to spite someone? This thought makes him smile bitterly. It seems that the thirst for revenge has clouded his opponent's mind. He, in turn, shows him some piece of paper and asks him to look here. The protagonist reads what is written on the piece of paper. He's amazed at what this aristocrat is throwing at him. Is it really true? Suddenly, something catches his attention. The young man looks at the paper again and realizes that it has a sign of thought exchange magic on the surface. Identification magic seal. This is a technique for secret transmission of information. The young man remembers that Badri used this during the exam. At that time, it seemed like just a trick. But now, the hero understands that he is already being barely ignored. There is nothing he can do about it. He can only join in. The aristocrat's voice is heard in his head. He says that the hero has finally joined him because he has so many questions. He addresses the young man by name. The aristocrat asks why he is here. Geek says the boys from the royal chamber. He asks why the hero would be in the empire. What's going on? It seemed that this young man knew more about him than he should. The young man, in turn, was tormented by doubts. What should he do? It would be too risky to reveal his cards now, but to continue playing in ignorance would mean missing the chance. But no matter how hard the protagonist tried to calculate the situation, he couldn't find a convincing explanation in his head. Admitting the truth meant getting involved in a dangerous game where the stakes were prohibitively high. Explaining all the subtleties and nuances of this complicated story would be almost impossible. There is only one way left. He tells his opponent that he may have made a mistake, because he does not understand what he is talking about. The words sounded false, even to his own ears. The aristocrat seemed to be waiting for just that. The aristocrat demands that the protagonist not pretend. He cannot make a mistake with a guy like the young man. His gaze showed undisguised hostility and firm confidence in his own rightness. The situation was heating up with every second, and the protagonist understood that he had less and less time to maneuver. He says that with a name like the main character's, it is very difficult to deceive, and he is acting naively. The aristocrat turns to him again and asks if the young man has really come here to assess the strength of the army, or perhaps even to attack openly, or the main character abandoned the princess and escaped. He hopes that this is not the case. He patiently waits for an answer from the protagonist. He replies that this cannot be, and he would never do such a thing. The aristocrat is touched by his stupidity and says that the young man does not know how to lie. The young man understands that he will soon be driven out of his mind. If this continues, he may not stay in the empire. He wonders what he should say to his opponent. The aristocrat, meanwhile, asks whether the main character really thinks only about himself. He says it's true, because the young man didn't give a damn about everything that was there. He abandoned his mistress and is living his best life here. The aristocrat says that he heard, of course, that she was capricious. Geek Von Kelm thinks the protagonist is no better. He begins to talk about what would have happened if he had been in the young man's place, but he is interrupted by a rude word. The aristocrat watches the hero sitting in front of him carefully. With a sly smile, he asks if he really managed to offend the young man. The young man replies that it is not that simple. He's tired of the aristocrat and his senseless chatter. He understands that the protagonist does not even deny the existence. He asks, does he really want to be recognized here? Riito Lilu says that it is not at all. He advises his friend not to jump to conclusions. A classmate demands that he answer why he is here. The main character is preparing for something and says that he has already spoken about it. He scribbles on his notebook and demands that the aristocrat shut up. He asks, does he really not understand the words here? With a snap of his finger, he summons an unknown monster and demands that everyone be quiet and let him concentrate on the lesson. The aristocrats look at this phenomenon in horror. He understands that this summoning magic, however, cannot give an account of how the heroes did it, because only the highest magicians can do it. He asks why the young man can do this now. The aristocrat understands that he must first protect himself, otherwise something very bad will happen. He turns his attention to the class and realizes that no one notices what he sees. Even with the penalty, they just don't see it. The young man understands that this is an illusion. He really wants to believe it, but he looks in horror into the mouth of the monster, which is gathering energy for an explosion. The aristocrat shields himself from the explosion with his hand. He is blown away by the blast wave. He does not understand what is happening. The young man looks at his desk. He understands that nothing is broken, but still it was a vision that had to be. The hero's hand is shaking, and even knowing this, he was ready for death. But death did not come. He looked around. Everything around was as before. A vision, a fantasy of an overactive imagination. Usually such magic can be easily broken if you get rid of the root. But this is the power of persuasion. You need to be very good at controlling the magic. The young man looks at the main character with anger. Red Rill, he understands that he still can't let go. In his mind, he threatens the main character to watch out, because one day he will expose him. Suddenly, his attention is drawn to a stone. Because the young man was distracted, he suffered the same fate as all the other classmates. The teacher smiles and says that they are finished. She looks at the whole class and asks if they felt what it was like. Although, judging by their looks, it's not even worth asking. She says it's all written on their faces. Now they know. They tried it on themselves, and she doesn't regret coming up with the task. The most important thing is that they had fun. The teacher says that they cannot stop at what they have achieved. As she said, at first it is just training, just a warm-up of the basics. When time passes after classes with her, they will be able to do this in their sleep. Nothing is impossible, because there are those who already succeed. So, she is going to put up a list. First, the number of mistakes will go, and then the number of mistakes will go, and then the number of completed tasks. Fourth place, Bella Bloodwood and Adolf Arban. They made only a few mistakes, an average of 4, so they are superior. In third place is Sarah Ines. The teacher says that she only made 1 mistake, and that she controls magic at a fairly good level. Second place goes to Malaria Lyrogator. She also made only 1 mistake, but got a higher grade for completing the tasks. Still, this is talent. The teacher keeps the intrigue, also takes the most important place. She calls the name of the main character, says that he made 0 mistakes. According to the completed tasks, he takes the highest place, without a doubt the strongest. The main character breathes a sigh of relief and thinks that this time he somehow succeeded. The teacher turns to the children who were not on the list. The woman advises them to try hard too. At this point, she decides to end their lesson. The princess says that it was excellent. It turns to the main character. The young man looks at her in surprise. The girl admires that he has never made a mistake, despite all the complexity in the surrounding atmosphere. This is an amazing mastery of magic. She would like him to teach her the same. The protagonist understands that it is a great honor. He is pleased to hear it. This must be some kind of great responsibility. He does not know what to do. A classmate of theirs comes up to the heroes and says that in this case, she wants to ask them about something. The princess turns to her and asks if it is true that her name is Sarah. The girl nods her head affirmatively and says with admiration that it is a great honor for her to be remembered as a princess. She apologizes for the day of accession. The princess says that it is not a big deal. She understands that it was not on purpose. The girl says that she also had confidence in magic, but this time the teacher's expectations were too high. She says that she also has a bad character. This is the number of tasks with a dexterous. It is very interesting how she came up with them. The main character understands that the girl does not mince words. He says that he will actually tell, because he has tricked the system a little. He reminds them that they were told they couldn't let the light in the stone go out. That meant they just had to watch the stone and their magic. That's why after the lesson started, he didn't immediately light the color of the stone. He took apart the magic that was contained in the stone and created the same and put it inside. A magic stone is a stone that has magic in it, and if it is inside the first stone, then another magic will be activated and the stone will burn constantly. The girls whisper to each other. The princess says that when he explains it like that, it all seems quite logical. The teacher said that it was usually impossible to do this. This stone is her original magic. She developed it through a huge amount of complex calculations. She researched the added mass to the magic itself, which no one else had before. It is not something that can be repeated so easily by just looking. He was able to do this in just a few minutes. The teacher asks her interlocutor if he knows what this means. Her interlocutor suggests that perhaps the main character is simply talented. The teacher agrees that this is also true. The interlocutor says that it is good when the possibilities of talented youth overcome the pride of an adult. The teacher says that she hates this in her. Meanwhile, the heroes are getting ready for the next lesson. Aries says that they will need to look after the main character. I wonder how he will grow. The aristocrat walks away from the crowd and feels humiliated. The protagonist's friend looks at him and asks if the young man has forgotten anything. Would you say no? Because the only thing he's interested in now is that if the aristocrat was so sure that he was a geek, then why didn't he make a fuss before and after the lesson? The young man tries to understand what his opponent is up to. The lesson ended with some unease. 3 days have passed since then. Dick no longer bothers the main character. He only looks at him with disdain when their eyes meet, which means he hasn't given up yet. The first week was ending solemnly. The young man and his friend are running to class, realizing that they are late. They say that this school is just too big. It's several kilometers from one building to another. One of the friends says that's true, but his friend spent too much time in the toilet. Avon shouts that he doesn't understand the combination of medicinal herbs. The protagonist laughs and says that the lesson where they had to prepare a laxative that wouldn't kill you was pretty weird. Suddenly, they break sharply. A man appears in front of them. The hero understands that they are about to crash. The protagonist says that he warned his friend to watch his step. The young man falls and apologizes. The man offers him his hand and asks if he is hurt. Avon looks up and sees a girl in front of him. He looks straight into her eyes and sees something frightening in them. With its help, the Aven rises. She adjusts her headdress and says that everything seems to be in order. In that case, she decides to leave. The hero looks after her for a long time. Not understanding what happened, the young man wonders why she turned the other way when they collided and Avon fell. He wonders if she is physically superior to him. The protagonist wonders who she is. One of the teachers says that they met Miss Raven. The protagonist asks again. The teacher says that she is almost certain that it was her. It is rare to see her at school. They were lucky to meet, even though she is Miss Raven. Her name is Elena Valentine. She is the daughter and miss of the capital merchants. She has extraordinary physical abilities, as well as a fighting sense. Therefore, no one dares to go against her in hand-to-hand combat. Now she is a second-year student and is an officer not only in her course, but in all classes. Also, because of her abilities, She goes to the battlefield as a selected training soldier. The protagonist thinks about the class officer and the chosen training soldier. His friend raises his hand. They turn to the teacher. He says that there are a lot of incomprehensible words in his speech. The girl agrees with him. She suggests that they keep the chosen training soldier. She was about to tell them about the class officer. She addresses all the young men. Now they will decide who will be the class officer. Class officer, you are the person who represents your class and is its head. In simple terms, this is a leader who will take responsibility for progress. Is a secretary making decisions on various presentations, other issues related to dissemination, and so on. Of course, the employment will be higher than that of other students. However, points will be added to the declared one taking into account the attitude to the role. She clarifies the method of appointment to the position. The appointment will be made through voting for recommendations. The teacher shows the students a piece of paper. 1 vote per person will repeat the anonymous process until fewer than 5 candidates remain. In the event of a tie, the candidates compete against each other in person, and the winner takes the place of class officer. The content of the battle will be decided if necessary. It is allowed not to vote, but voting for yourself is prohibited. The teacher finishes with explanations. It is the students' turn to ask questions or make recommendations. The protagonist thinks about the class officer. This is a rather pompous title. In fact, it is simply the choice of the class monitor. The school will require not only skills, but also leadership qualities in order to become recognized by others. The main character's thoughts are interrupted by the princess, who raises her hand and says that she has a question for the teacher. She asks if this means that according to the rules, public voting is also possible. The woman replies that it is, but there are a few nuances. The princess gives her full name and declares that her voice will remain empty. Everyone in the class is surprised by such decisions. The protagonist realizes that if she is deliberately stating this publicly, it means that she is recommending herself. The protagonist wonders if she is really doing this. He admits that someone else could have done it. But here, everything has already been decided. Everyone knows that she is capable and charismatic. And judging by the atmosphere of the class, everyone thinks. But since she is a princess, then the result is understandable even without a vote. The protagonist wonders if she has always been such a far-sighted person. The teacher says it's an unusual case, but it's not against the rules. So, is there anyone else who would like to recommend or make a statement? In this case, the protagonist's friend decides to vote for his comrade. The princess looks at him in surprise. The teacher is also amazed by such a statement. The main character turns to his friend and asks to feel the atmosphere. He, in turn, says that it's not that he's not confident in the princess, it's just that this school is a meritocracy. In this case, he thinks that the main character is more suitable for this role. So far, he has the highest marks in the whole class in exams and in lessons. He thinks that no one will argue with this. One of her classmates also decides to vote for the young man. She says it's a meritocracy, which is true, but he has pretty high skills and stats. She thinks that's what a leader should have. The girl wants to say that she has absolutely no intention of doing anything bad to Her Highness, and this is just an objective judgment. The heroine says that she understands everything. The young man is a warrior, an honest assessment. They recognize him, and he is grateful to them for this. However, frankly speaking, he does not want to become the class monitor. He left the kingdom precisely because he didn't like the high workload. His departure would be pointless if they continue to load him with such work here. But he doesn't want to escape their assessment either, so he, the main character, is embarrassed here. He says he will vote for Lady Melilla. He says he agrees that he has good grades, but he thinks he does not yet deserve the trust of the class and does not have it. And the girl has all this, after all. She is the princess of the Gordaderodo Empire. The girl looks at him silently. The protagonist continues to say that there are such concepts as respect, admiration of the class to the leader. They are characteristic of the lady, so the class can be calm with her. He repeats once again that he votes for the princess. Classmates agree with him. One of the girls raises her hand, says that not only grades matter, but also achievement, popularity status, and so on. She votes for the lady. Another classmate, a judge, is given the gift of her and votes for the princess. The class leader, in his opinion, is like its face. If you think about it like that, then the lady is better suited for this position. The main character is glad that he managed to manipulate the general consciousness. If he continues in the same spirit, then he will not be chosen. However, the other classmates are against it and decide to vote for the young man. One of them says that he is in this school because they do not judge by appearance and origin, and he wants this principle to be preserved. This vote becomes like a debate. The teacher says that as long as everything goes smoothly, she is not against it. However, she is a little annoyed that she explained the rules in vain. The girl asks who else wants to express their opinion. The other classmates also raise their hands, saying that they are for the princess because she is elegant and noble. They immediately have opponents who vote for the main character because he is strong. The main character watches the voting and is happy that the princess wins. More and more people vote for the princess. The deer argue their choice by saying that she knows how to manage people and will not be evil. The counterbalance is the opinion that the main character is very modest. Suddenly the voting turns around and everyone starts voting for the main character. Some think he's a good target. Others say he was awesome when he fought. Is someone voting because of the variable? The main character begins to get tense because more and more people are voting for him. During the voting, it turns out that both heroes have received the same number of votes. It was a very fierce fight. The teacher says that there is one person left who did not vote. The protagonist understands that if the votes remain the same, he will be forced to fight the princess. He begs the last person to give her his vote. It turns out that only the geek remains. The protagonist thinks this is good because his opponent will not allow him to rise in status. The teacher says that there is no point in asking anonymously, so the geek can say it directly. She asks him what his solution will be. Geek says he refuses to vote. The protagonist is horrified and doesn't understand why. He could have simply given his vote to the princess and deliberately sat and remained silent until the very end. He doesn't understand what the point was then. Did he really decide to set him up just because of his personal dislike for him? He looks at his opponent's face and sees that it says it all. The teacher says that in this case the voting is over. According to the geek's decision, the result has not changed. The same number of votes indicates that the voting method failed to select the class officer, which means there will be a decisive battle. The main character will go up against the princess. The young man understands that everything has turned out in such a way that he will not be able to escape. He needs to think about whether there are any positive aspects to this. Suddenly, the person sitting next to him asks the young man to try harder. The young man understands that in this way he can get closer to the imperial detachment, and in this school it is possible to skip as an external student, and so many people already trust him. Despite the fact that only a few days have passed since the meeting, he can't ignore all their feelings. He decides that he needs to control himself, take this seriously. If he's going to fight, then fight to the last. For the post of class officer, the princess says that the hero fought a lot, but made a decision. She smiles and says confidently that she will not lose. There is firmness in her gaze. The protagonist realizes that she is more serious than she seems. The protagonist suggests that perhaps there is something behind this, that she wants to become a class officer for a reason. He chuckles and asks her to feel sorry for him. The action takes place the next day on the second underground floor of the military officers' school of the Kingdom of Gallister. The most important thing here is a large training hall, commonly known as the underground stadium. The teacher says that there are 22 candidates, 2 special classes in 20 places, and they ask if everyone will pass. So now it's the turn of the protagonist's battle against the princess. The officer's duel begins. The princess warms up, tells the protagonist that no one knew that they would ever find themselves as rivals in such a situation. She says that it is indeed a strange thing. She's not going to lose to him, although she knows that he is strong enough. Having defeated him, she will value a place in the officer class. The young man laughs and asks her to go easy on him. After all, that's why she shouldn't think about it. Her expectations of the fight are based on just one example. It's better to focus on the current situation instead. The main character even feels uncomfortable in his stomach. I checked, helped him. He wants to get into the officer class. The teacher understands that they both have enough zeal, and this is great. But it is worth seeing what happens next. She says that before we start the fight, we should explain some rules. He thought it would be hand-to-hand combat. The teacher says that, on the one hand, yes. But even though the princess is in the same class as the main character, she comes from a royal family. And if the main character inflicts serious injuries on her, it could lead to execution. Usually, not only the technique itself, but also the participants are not different. But for a warrior, the rules are especially important. So the rules of this particular battle think about its participant. Classmates are surprised. They ask, "How is this possible?" The main character is also horrified. Teacher Aries appears next to them and says that not much time has passed. She jumps with impatience to find out the outcome of the battle. Everyone present sighs heavily. Aries says that there's some kind of heavy atmosphere here because of how unexpected it is. She says she will explain the rules to them and go take a nap. The hero understands she is offended. The girl says that this time the competition for the main character's princess will be a game of popping balloons. The beginning is necessary for them to stand in specially designated places, and then you need to arrange the balls one by one. The duel begins after the signal. The winner is the one who bursts the ball first. The competition time is exactly 1.5 hours. The heroes must attack someone else's while defending their own. This is a fight for their officer rank. This is not just a fight for their officer rank. This is not just a fight for status or superiority. The girl says that everyone is making her angry and asks if they are nervous. She abruptly interrupts her explanation and says that she lied about going to bed. She has a duty. She is here as an observer. And Mr. Gurn, she is here to watch the progress of the fight to judge. The girl takes a pose, gets ready, and watches the fight carefully. She does a certain maneuver and asks if they saw it. Then she demands that everyone take up positions and begin. The students do not understand where the broom in her hand came from. The teacher looks at everyone haughtily and demands that they stop asking this question, because they say such things and don't even blush. Air says that they are still green. In her opinion, it is clear what goes where. The princess turns to the protagonist and asks him to prepare to start the duel quickly, because she is afraid that she will not be able to withstand the sensei's statements any longer. Yes, one of the teachers raises her hand and announces a duel again, the princess against the young man. This is a duel for a place in the officer class. Everyone needs to take their positions and get ready. She gives the command to start. Each of the heroes begins to use magic. Classmates watch the fight closely. One of them says that the main character finished earlier. The main character's rules were most confused by the fact that the ball that needs to be protected can very easily be burst by any enemy attack, a stray shot or a blow from a blind spot. Even if he himself gets hit, it can burst and the young man will lose. Therefore, it is necessary to strengthen the defense. The main character uses protective earth magic Gravedigger. The teacher says he chose the right tactics, a reliable way to fight like a textbook. But right is not always better. The protagonist's opponent uses offensive magic. The princess uses the triple water lotus. The main character's friend looks at this in horror and swears that this is battle's magic. The girl uses 3 lotuses at the same time. After such dignity cannot be restored. Face-to-face clashes on us are much weaker than the main character, which means he will defeat him dishonestly. The girl screams that victory will be hers. The protagonist says that now everything is clear to him. He certainly didn't expect this, but since she chose a spell that required preparation, he managed to finish the extraneous protections. Just in case, he will put up a few more walls. Avon watches him closely. He shouts at the protagonist to watch out. The young man looks up and sees 3 huge lotuses above him. They crash right into him and his defenses. The classmates scream in horror. The princess says that she immediately targeted the main character. If you want to kill the general, then first kill his horse. Thanks to this trick, she will be able to win, although the girl did not expect that he would bite so quickly. However, she is not against it. The girl says that she knows that he is stronger than her and is ready to do anything to win. In other words, she will continue to attack and will continue to play in an aggressive style. She will not leave a single chance to the main character. Everyone is watching the progress of the fight carefully. Suddenly, the princess looks at her opponent in amazement. Avon also turns his gaze to his friend. He asks Her Majesty if she really killed her rival. The girl shakes her head and says that the protagonist can withstand such a thing. She looks at her rival and begs him to say that he is joking. She says that she mentioned that she is ready to do anything to win, but she would never take his life. Suddenly, an arrow flies out of a cloud of dust. She crashes straight into the lotus hanging in the air above the princess's head. She watches in horror as her spell crumbles, the pieces falling down. The main character rubs his hands and says that, as he thought, the arrow did not penetrate. is a man who watches his opponent closely. He tried to shoot the ball with debris under the cover of smoke, but what did you do wrong? The protagonist knows that he immediately aimed. He says he didn't even notice the water lotus, let alone the balloon. Maybe the balloon has a green effect, preventing mana detection. The protagonist is almost certain that this is the case. The enemy has clearly thought out countermeasures in case of an attempt to blow up the ball directly. In addition, he has only just learned to control mana outside his body. The protagonist's friend enthusiastically thanking God that he was okay. He knew that nothing would happen to the young man, but he began to doubt. The protagonist says that everything happened so quickly that he did not have time to use magic. The main character is happy that he is interested in martial arts. The princess asks if he really destroyed her attack with his bare hands. She, of course, understands that it is not worth comparing, but she begins to lose confidence in herself. The protagonist says that she shouldn't think that way, because Her Highness's magic is simply beautiful. If he hadn't chosen a strategy with an emphasis on defense, she would have definitely defeated him. The young man stands up and says that he is not so easy to defeat. He defeated her to become the class officer. The girl looks at him carefully. She sighs and asks, "Is that really true?" She suggests that perhaps he will back down because of her status or position. The protagonist says that she should not have had such optimistic expectations. As he thought, she was also planning their fight. The girl turned out to be stubborn. The heroine says that, however, such things would only make her even weaker. To be honest, her strategy was to surprise him a couple of times. But such tricks probably won't work anymore. The heroine says that in this case she can only go forward. The girl uses the attacking ice magic, Icy Rain. The protagonist uses earth attack magic, Sandstorm. He says that the girl is doing the same thing again. He knew it. The classmates watched them closely, amazed that the opponents once again used a spell at the same time. But this time, the protagonist also uses attack magic. Her Highness's spell is as good as the water lotus. She is definitely more talented than most. She has demonstrated her magical abilities a few times. The princess is confident in her magic, hence her lively character. It is worth making this a battle of attrition, otherwise the main character may lose. Oh yes, the man thinks that he could only read her up to the point of creating the plan, which means she understood his telepathic ability. He can predict how everything will end. The protagonist realizes that he can't let his opponent set the pace. He decides to give himself an advantage by reading her. The girl stretches her shoulders. She releases the Hall after 3 attack spells in a row. Blue Rose, Ice Rain, and Ice Spikes. The young man instantly activates Defense, Earth Flip, and Body Enhancement Technique, Sense, Steel Armor. Classmates watch the confrontation of heroes attentively. They are amazed at how the princess unleashed a barrage of spells on him at a furious pace and does not give him a chance to catch his breath. However, the young man, as if nothing had happened, repelled all the attacks. The heroes try to figure out who is leading this battle. They understand that everything is very serious, and it is impossible to tell. The level is too high. The princess does not allow him to attack, and the main character does not allow him to attack, and the main character does not allow her to break through. Just an ideal balance of forces. Suddenly, the teacher intervenes in their conversation. She asks how much longer they can talk. They can't push forward because it's dangerous. She creates a barrier that doesn't allow the heroes to go any further. In fact, the balance of such forces is almost equal. However, it is worth even a little bit to disturb the fragile balance, as the scales will swing in any direction. The protagonist understands that in order to achieve victory, both sides will probably have to take risks, even if it is unwise. The winner is the one who puts in the most effort and goes beyond the possible. He uses a protective earth spell. He uses a dirty trick. A huge mud hand reaches out towards his opponent. Avin shouts excitedly. He tells everyone that the main character will attack first. The princess smirks, because the young man used a huge mud hand against her. She asks if he really wants to crush both her and the ball at once. She asks if this is his answer to her spell from earlier. The girl says that even though the lessons are large, they are still just dirt. Isn't it too unreliable? The heroine uses the water lotus technique. A column of water crashes into a mud-covered hand. It crunches and breaks. A web of cracks appears on the palm. Classmates understand the girl simply froze her hand and completely smashed it. And she calculated everything so that not a single fragment hit her own ball. They ask how it is even possible to react so quickly. The princess smiles, says that the main character is naive and will think twice about what could stop her. The young man replies that he didn't really expect that. In fact, it was only intended as a diversion. Meanwhile, the young man jumps out of the pile of debris. Autonoklassniki are amazed at this turn of events, that the main character rushed into a frontal attack. From the very beginning, the dirty trick was not intended to be successful. It served only as a distraction. The young man takes a swing. He waited for the slightest hint of inattention on the part of his rival and immediately rushed into the attack. However, the princess smiles. The main character crashes his hand into an invisible barrier opposite the ball. The young man looks at the invisible barrier in surprise. He did not expect such a turn of events and was already counting on a quick victory. The girl says that before she only showed him her attack. It is not surprising that the protagonist was wrong about her strengths. The princess says that her real specialty is defensive magic. She uses the defensive spell Goddess's Veil. Classmates are amazed. They say that this can't be. She unleashed such a powerful spell in a second. She controls such power and so precisely. Suddenly they realize what is happening. The protagonist has risked everything and still has not broken to the defense. The young man exclaims with annoyance. Now the princess only had to knock down the unprotected ball, and that's it. There is no need for strength now. What is important now is speed. The main thing is to get there faster than he can put up protection again. The girl understands that she needs to aim accurately. Her goal is just one shot and one hit. Suddenly, the main character flies up to his balloon and breaks the projectile that the princess launched at him. He does this with his bare hands, thereby astonishing all the spectators. The girl looks at the main character in horror. The audience asks if anyone else saw this. They find it hard to believe, even though it all happened before their eyes. Avin is surprised that his friend outran the magic projectile and reflected it. The princess does not understand how this happened. The girl knows that her opponent is strong, but she says that it is impossible to pull off something like this with such precision in such a situation. This is pure nonsense. She says that the main character was standing next to her. He was in the same state as she was. Classmates say that no matter how it happened, the battle will now have to start all over again. The girl says not quite. The princess kneels before the main character. She coughs. Those present want to rush to her aid, but she says that there is nothing terrible in it, just a small magical deficiency. Classmates ask what it is. Teacher Are says it is not surprising if they have not encountered anything like this before. Magic always circulates in those, but with a sharp expenditure, its concentration drops sharply. As a result, the body loses a vital element. Dizziness, headaches, and fatigue occur. This is magical deficiency. However, I do not intend to achieve such an effect, no matter how hard I try. She says that the volume of magic, its circulation, and the efficiency of expenditure are all individual. These indicators are different for all people, so it is impossible to predict exhaustion. The protagonist says that he will shoot all his own in such a way as to spend less magic than the enemy. The rules of their duel themselves are created in such a way as to compensate for the difference in physical strength, so it is logical that the one with more magic wins. That's why he relied on his fists from the very beginning, so to speak, betting not only on magic, but also on muscles. And it worked. The girl rises from her knees, asks if he had calculated everything, if everything went according to his scenario. She says that this does not even cause admiration, but such calculations are rather frightening. The protagonist says that he did not expect her to recover so quickly. He says that Her Majesty flatters him. He has almost no magic left. He says that he has one more attack in stock, but does not want to waste it. So he goes down and takes the earth fragment. He says that it is therefore time for them to wrap things up. The girl smiles and agrees with him. She says that she also has strength left for one attempt. The heroine releases a magical charge. Suddenly, some dark mass envelops her hand. The protagonist says that he would prefer not to resort to this. He has nowhere to put it. He uses the spell Pud to bind him, hold him. The young man asks the girl for forgiveness for the impudence to restrict the movement of a member of the royal family in such a way. This is a real Cashland because he has no other choice. The heroine now understands what he meant by, there is one more attack in store. She says that the protagonist of the truth is amazing. Further resistance will only be a disgrace. She admits her defeat. The girl says that she lost. The young man bursts her balloon at that moment. The teacher, who has been watching the fight all this time, says that it is over. Classmates who are rooting for the main character rejoice. Victory goes to the main character. A teacher approaches the young man, says that they will not waste time, so she hands him an officer's armband. She congratulates the young man, says that today he is the class officer. Something like doubt appears on his face. Ayres comes up to the main character and asks if he was really scared at the last moment. The protagonist denies this and says that they rather feel joy. Be that as it may, he achieved victories through his own labor. However, he takes seriously the fact that only half of the others voted for him, and he must earn the trust of the others with his actions in the future. This is what he is going to work hard on. The protagonist wants to give it his all. He turns to the guys and says that he hopes for their support. He suggests that they work together. Classmates say that after such a fight, no one will argue with him. He proved what he is capable of, and there can be no complaints here. After all, this place was created for such tests. The main one. The hero was worried about how those who voted for the princess of the day would react. So far, it seems that everything is fine. Now there's no turning back. Moreover, for some reason, he is even somehow happy with such a result. The princess asks, "Since everything has already been discussed, isn't it time to release her?" The protagonist is horrified. He and the teacher who handed him the bandage completely forgot about it. Irish knew but decided to remain silent. The young man apologizes and says that he will take it off right now. The princess says that everything is fine and asks him to give her hand.